and have not varied for a number of meetings now. But under those three criteria, really the situation points towards inflation settling at our 2% targets. We can come back to the path, but this is what we are seeing, and that is what has predicated the cut that we made today. Now, you asked me about my future, which is far less important than the future of the economy and the future of our monetary policy, rest assured. But I can very firmly tell you that I have always been, and I'm fully determined to deliver on my mission, and I'm determined to complete my term. So I regret to tell you that you're not about to see the back of me.
Next question goes to Annette Weisbach of CNBC. Annette, please.
Hi, President Lagarde. I have a question. When I read through the communique today, I have the feeling that you're quite confident on the economy despite all the uncertainties. So is that a right assessment? And at the same time, you're also quite confident that inflation is under control. So does that bring me to the right conclusion that we're almost done when it comes to rate cutting? And then a question on your thinking about the boost from the fiscal space, because clearly it will take time until we'll see that materializing on the economy and also probably on inflation. So just to also understand, why are you so confident that this is actually supporting the economy also in the shorter term, despite all the uncertainties? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your question. We have hardly revised our growth numbers. So the only year where we have slightly revised is 2026, and by 0.1%. So we have confirmed our projected growth rate as per our projection of last March at 0.9% for 2025. And that was certainly reinforced by the number we had for Q1. So I mentioned the 0.3 Q1 number, which was, as you know, revised from an initial 0.4. I wouldn't expect, I would not exclude that there be further revision of that number on the upside. Now, this is attributable to multiple factors. It's improved consumption, it's improved investment, but more importantly, it's the buildup of inventory or anticipated purchases and therefore sales in fear and anticipation of the tariffs. So that Q1 is, of course, very peculiar, well, very particular, more than peculiar, and is clearly giving momentum to the growth that we are seeing and anticipating for 2025. But again, I would not exclude that that number of 0.3 be revised upward, given the volume that we are seeing being traded out of some countries in particular. But we are not revising 27, and we are very marginally revising 2026 because there is a carryover, number one, and because we believe that the impact of tariff, if and when they materialize, on the export that we have towards the United States, which I remind you is only 17% of our total exports outside from the euro area and European countries, will impact predominantly on 26 and will then be significantly offset by the expected investment in both military equipment and construction, or infrastructure, if you will, particularly out of some countries. So our assessment is that that will have a bearing on 27 predominantly, some in 26, but predominantly in 27. So you have this offset between the two. So are we confident? I think that would be far-fetched, because we are in a good place. As I said, I think we are well positioned as you know, after that 25 basis point rate cut and with the rate path as it is, we are in a good place. We will face uncertainty. We do not know what the outcome of the negotiations will be between the various partners. We don't know the level of retaliation that might be decided, which incidentally is not included in our baseline, as you will see published later on. And as a result, we have to be prepared, and we will be assessing meeting by meeting data as they come in. But, you know, as I said again, we are well positioned at the moment, and the path of inflation that we see certainly returns to 2% in 2027. So we start from a place where we have inflation for 2025 at 2%. It goes below target in 26 for reasons that have predominantly to do with the price of energy and the value of the euro. Because as you know, it's based on our current assumption of those prices now. And that's what explains these numbers.
Next question, Francesco Canepa of Reuters. Francesco, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So you said that the current level of rates leaves you in a good position.
Mm-hmm.
Are we to understand that as an indication that you're done cutting interest rates? Or if I can rephrase the question in another way, what would you need to see for you to cut rates again?
Again, we are in a good position, and we are in a good position on the basis of the current rate path and with the 25 basis point cuts that we decided, so that we can face the uncertainties that are coming our way. But as you have heard in the monetary policy statement, we will decide meeting by meeting on the basis of data. And we will assess, as and when data come in, whether or not that position is secure in order to deliver on our 2% medium-term target. What I'm saying today is that we are in that good position.
Next question to Aude Kersulek of BFM Business. Aude, please.
Thank you, President Lagarde, for taking my question. First question, would you say the monetary stance has now shifted to neutral, or is it still restrictive, even slightly? And second question, some countries are facing higher debt and may struggle to attract investors. At what point does that become a concern for the ECB in terms of policy transmission and financial stability? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your two questions. We have not discussed this wonderful concept of the neutral rate on the occasion of this meeting. And I think that we all know well that as we are getting closer to that zone, we need to be particularly attentive. We need to be confident in our resolve to deliver with the appropriate monetary policy our medium-term 2% target. But we have not discussed that neutral rate. And I alluded to that at our last press conference. You know, the neutral rate is predicated on the absence of shock. Great equilibrium, no shock. Well, I wish there was no shock. But we have just nearly concluded a cycle of monetary policy that dealt with a series of shocks. Pandemic, war in Ukraine, energy crisis. And I think we have done that decently well. Inflation is at target 2% medium term. We are currently around 2%. Expectations are well anchored around 2%. And those elements that I told you repeatedly over the few last conferences was of concern to us, namely inflation on services, evolution of wages, evolution of profit. Those three elements are coming really in line with what our projections were in order to deliver on our 2% medium-term target. For the moment, we are facing significant uncertainty. You will read in the material, in the monetary policy statement, I think we quote uncertainty 9 or 10 times. It abounds. There is plenty of that. And clearly we are trying to improve our game as much as we can in order to anticipate, measure, caliber, but it's proving obviously quite difficult. And that's the reason you will be not only receiving our projection exercise, but also the scenarios which encapsulate some of the channels of transmission to growth and inflation. Some of them, not all of them. In particular, I would mention one that we discussed quite extensively during the Governing Council, which is the disruption of the supply chain. That is not included in any of our scenarios.
And the next question goes to Svein Iljan of the Bulgarian newswire GETTR.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
I hope all your colleagues have welcomed you to the circle.
I hope to. According to the ECB convergence report published Wednesday, Bulgaria is ready to join the Eurozone on January 1st next year. What do you expect to be the effects of Bulgaria's accession to the Euro area? And will the currency zone be stronger with a likely new member state?
So first of all, I would like to congratulate Bulgaria, the Bulgarian people, and welcome them. This is not yet a completed decision-making process because, as you know, while the Commission and us have validated under the convergence report that the criteria are met, the European Council still has to approve. So I don't want to prejudge what the European Council will decide, but there is a very strong likelihood that Bulgaria will become our 21st member around the table. And we are delighted that the circle gets larger, and we will be looking forward to the Bulgarian contributions, both in terms of intellectual input, economic analysis, monetary policy determination, and as soon as the decision is final with the European Council, as you probably know, we will welcome for several meetings before January 1st, the Bulgarian representative at the table of the Governing Council in order to sort of facilitate and do the onboarding properly, and so that we can also get to know a new colleague. I also hope that the Bulgarian people will value the solidity of the Euro area league. I also hope that the Bulgarian people will value the solidity of the Euro area, the solidity of the currency that we have. Some of you have probably noticed that the supportive judgment of the Europeans has gone up and is now at 83%. So you have 83% of the Europeans, based on a survey that is on a regular basis, 83% actually value and appreciate the euro as their currency. So I hope we can together do everything we can so that Bulgarians can also appreciate the value and the shield impact that the euro constitutes for new members.
And the next question goes to Stefan Rekius of Handelsblatt. Stefan, please.
Thank you very much for the floor. First question is, some analysts have entertained the idea that you could skip July to make concession to those Governing Council members who have already become reluctant to cut rates further. Could you walk us through today's deliberations in this light? And my second question is, you have been reluctant to declare victory over inflation for quite some time. So is this the right time for a victory lap? And if not, why?
Yeah, victory laps are always nice, but there is always another battle. So, as I said, I think that with today's cut, and the current level of interest rates, number one, I think we are getting to the end of a monetary policy cycle that was responding to compounded shocks, including COVID, including the war in Ukraine, the illegitimate war in Ukraine, and the energy crisis. But of course, we are now into a different time with different players, with different partners, with different policies. And we will continue to analyze and assess and measure and make sure that we deliver on our 2% medium-term target. This is in a way the thing that's certain. You should not doubt for a second our determination to deliver with the appropriate monetary policy, the 2% medium-term target. What we're seeing currently with this, 2% projected inflation for 2025, around 2% for 2027, and 1.6 in 26, caused predominantly with our current assumption on the price of energy and the value of the euro. We have a good path to this target, and we'll make sure that we I don't mean to use the word oscillate or navigate, but it will be, close navigation around our target. That's where we have to be and want to be.
This concept of the direction of travel, which you earlier used in this rate cycle, your today's remark suggests to me that the direction of travel now probably is more a sideways movement rather than kind of a downward as it was by the end of the year. Would that be the right takeaway from your today's remarks? And my second question again is on these remarks by Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum. Some people suggest that the disclosure that you considered leaving the ECB early could undermine your ability to do your job properly, as you might be seen as a lame duck. What would be your response to those concerns? Thanks.
Thank you for your two questions. On the first one, the reason I used the direction of travel concept was when we were really at a distance from our medium-term 2% target. So to talk about the direction of travel, when we have our medium-term 2% target in sight, sustainably so, when underlying inflation is not budging. So for those in doubt, headline inflation in 2026 is clearly oil and gas and the value of the euro, which we assess at the time when we cut off the period when we do our when staff does its assessment. And underlying inflation, core inflation, this is hardly moving, and it's at around our target. So there's no point talking about the direction of travel. There's no point talking about sideways. What I'm saying is that we will be determined to deliver that 2% medium-term target. We will be looking at all data that come in. We will be deciding meeting by meeting, and we will constantly assess and reassess how we are delivering on this 2% medium-term target. As to your second question, I will repeat what I have said. I have always been driven by my mandate, and I'm determined to complete my term. Period.
And the next question goes to Isabella Bufacchi of Il Sole 24 Ore. Isabella, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I have two questions. One is on APP and PEP, in the sense that the ECB no longer reinvests the principal payments of these portfolios. Would the Governing Council have to put on hold quantitative tightening if it were to decide for a pause in interest rate cuts? Even if these no longer investments have a very small impact, keeping interest rates unchanged during QT is somehow a restrictive stance, as the ECB is draining liquidity. And my second question is on the role of the euro. The governor of the Bank of Italy, Fabio Panetta, warned in his speech on the 30th of May, in his concluding remarks, that the recent US depreciation raised important questions about the future structure of the international monetary system and the dominant role of the US dollar as both a reserve and a trade.
I apologize. I'm going to reset my soundboard here. There's an issue with the earpiece.
Special experience in the United States. What do you think is happening now with the dollar?
Some of you would like to hear me talk about pause, hold, or whatever. I just can repeat myself that we are currently well positioned to navigate the uncertainties of the next months. And I think the risk of inconsistency anyway is not, sorry, the risk of inconsistency of QT associated with interest rate policy, which is our main tool, is probably less critical in the event that I'm not confirming here now of a pause than it is in the event of a cut. So I don't see that, but neither do I say anything about future decisions, which would only be predicated on major shocks that we are not seeing at the moment. Now, on the role of the euro, I highly regard the speech that was given by my colleague and friend, Governor Panetta, Gentile Governatore, right? And I happen to be very much on the same page as he is. I gave a speech in Berlin about 10 days ago now at the Hertie School of the Jacques Delors Institute, in which I tried to identify the key pillars that would need to be consolidated and further developed if the euro was to play a critical role as an international reserve currency. And my conclusion is that there is an opportunity that is opening now in order to strengthen the role of the euro as an international currency, as to take it further towards possibly the international reserve currency of choice. But my conclusion is that it is not going to be granted to us. It should not be taken as a given. And it will require, in particular, that member states, the Commission, the European Council make very substantive decisions that will have to do with consolidating the economic and geopolitical role of Europe, that will simplify, streamline, and develop the role of the capital market union in particular, the saving and investment union, if you will, but particularly the capital market union. And we'll have to continue to sustain the effort of making Europe a place where the rule of law is respected, where a contract is a contract, so that there is certainty on the part of the investors, of the economic actors, that Europe is actually a reliable place of business. So I think it's not a question that can be responded in yes or no. It's a fairly...
All right, the S&P 500 is open. It's trading at 5,987. VIX is trading at 1745. Euro is trading at 1.14. Oil is trading at 63.89. BITO is trading at 21.21, almost 22. And the yen is trading at 143.07. Natural gas is trading at 3.74. UCO is trading at 21.99. Gush is at 20.85. And DRIP is trading at It's trading at 11 right now. BITO is just, yeah, I mean, it's just compared to yesterday, it went up, but it's still, Bitcoin's just not moving. It's just not moving. Okay, let me go back to the video here.
Regarding of it coming from the euro and the energy, and regardless of the outcome of the trade war. And second question, and I also wanted to ask about BBVA Sabadell merger, which is now being checked by the Spanish ministers. And even though it has the ECB's green light and the other one of the competition authorities, do you fear that political opposition to mergers could hamper the advances on the banking union? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you don't mind if I ask my colleague, Vice President and friend, Luis de Guindos, to address the latter part, and I would turn the floor over to you, and I'll come back to yours afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, President. Good afternoon to everyone. As you have said, we produced our report and we released our report. I think that it was almost 1 year ago. And now the antitrust authorities in Spain, they have given their opinion and the remedies that they have imposed for the deal. And now, according to the Spanish law, the government has the possibility to analyze the conditions imposed and, according to the general interest, to modify these conditions. As you can imagine, we can wait. We should wait until we have, a definitive opinion from the Spanish government. Otherwise, what we could be making is a sort of a speculation that I think that it doesn't make much sense in this moment of time.
Thank you, Vice President. And on your first question, I just want to remind you that our forecast is 2% inflation in 25, 1.6 in 26, 2% in 27. And our core inflation is even more stable than that. It's 2.4 in 25, 1.9 26, 1.9 27. Now, of course, you think, oh, 1.6 in 26. That's exactly part of the assessment that has been produced by staff. And if you look at what other institutions have forecasted, it's at the very low end of the range for 2027. And that's also because they take into account most recent data available, not including Q1, because I think Q1 will give us some surprises. But if you compare headline inflation and core inflation, you can see exactly where the difference lies. And that is energy prices and the value of the euro. We also have inflation, both headline and core, returning to 2%, 1.9% for core in 2027. And the cuts of today, the 25 basis points cut, is deliberately taking care of that inflation path. So we are confident of the analysis of our staff on that basis. And as I said, we will do what is necessary in order to make sure that inflation stays at our 2% targets. Monetary policy will be appropriately determined on that basis. But as I said, we are very well positioned.
And the last question goes to Chelsea Delaunay of the Wall Street Journal. Chelsea, please. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm also going to ask about inflation. I mean, the narrative of the past several post-pandemic years is higher for longer, structurally higher inflation for all of these different reasons. And looking both at the core and the headline forecast and your expectation potentially for a structurally stronger euro, is that still the expectation, higher for longer for inflation and for rates? And then my second question is also about the euro. Whenever the euro goes up, people worry about how that's going to impact exporters and some of these export-dependent economies. And I'm curious if you think the Eurozone is strong enough now for a strong euro.
Is the Eurozone strong enough for a strong euro? That's your bottom line question of your second question, right? Well, you know, when I look around and reflect on the work that we have done in the last 6 years, we have a very solid labor market. Labor market where participation has, including most recently, increased, where we have been at rock bottom unemployment rate ever since the euro was created. The fears of recession that abundant only about a year ago have not materialized. We are forecasting 0.9, 1.1, 1.3 with very limited revision to growth. The output gap closes at the end of our projection horizon. Wages have increased over the course of those years, particularly with a view to catching up with the lost purchasing power that citizens had suffered as a result of inflation. But it is now decelerating, just in line and in time, I would say, to deliver on our 2% medium-term target. The monetary policy is transmitting quite smoothly to the economy. Credit is up, could be further and higher up, but credit is up. Rates are transmitting, including to corporates and mortgages. So I would say that the economy is responding quite well to our monetary policy and is delivering on that front. I would add, as I did in response to one of your colleagues earlier, that more needs to be done. And what we have seen, the Vice President and I, when participating in the finance ministers' meetings in Brussels, whether it's ECOFIN or Eurogroup, or on the occasion of Pascal Donoghue, the president of the Eurogroup, when he had dinner with us a couple of nights ago, we perceive a serious momentum to improve, to change, to simplify, to streamline, and to encourage and lock in, well, not lock in, but welcome capital into Europe. And we are seeing it. You know, the reverse Yankee bonds, significant increase that we have seen in the last few weeks is a clear indication that there is trust in our system. The capital flow that we are seeing as well, whether it is, European investment returning to Europe or a bit of non-European investment coming to Europe, all that is an indication that at least market forces, investors, those who move real money around, actually see value and have confidence in Europe. So that would be my answer to your second question. I'm not sure what you meant by higher for longer, because I think I have gone out of my way to say that we are in a good place and we are well positioned now, and that we will be assessing meeting by meeting on the basis of data, what, if any, needs to be done in terms of appropriate monetary policy to return us to the 2% medium-term target. So I think that really sort of brings together the discussions that we've had over the last 2 days. And with that, I wish you a happy day, happy summer for those of you who live early, and see you soon.
The next press conference is on the 24th of July. So up until then, all the best. Thank you.
All right, that was EC President Christine Lagarde speaking in Frankfurt as the central bank cuts rates for the 8th time this year. It hasn't been 9 times. If you don't remember that it was 9 times, that's because it wasn't 9 times. This is Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller alongside Katie Greifeld. You know why I say that, right?
Because President Trump truthed it the other day.
And Ferris Bueller.
And I actually did not catch that part of the reference, but the ECB cutting rates as predicted. Shall we talk about the U.S. equity market, which has been open for about 10 minutes here?
Yeah, and
giving up our gains, down about 1/10 of a percent when it comes to the S&P 500, even though we got some very interesting news when it comes to the trade negotiation stance between the U.S. and China, Matt.
Yeah, I was also going to say relatively close to a bull market. I didn't notice that we turned back down.
Yeah.
If we rise to 59.79, and of course we had hit that level for a while yesterday, we would be at 20% up from the lowest level. So we could still make it today, but we kind of retreated yesterday. So now on a closing basis, we're up 19.8% from the lows in February.
You did see the NASDAQ 100 manage to close in the green yesterday, which was interesting. The overall index faded, but tech held up. And a lot of the future direction could be determined for the tech index. Tonight, we have Broadcom earnings and a few others. But for right now, it sort of feels like a holding pattern.
Right, it does. Although I think it's interesting to look at rates. We're pretty low right now at 4.35 on the 10-year. The news you're talking about that hasn't moved markets. President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping reportedly actually had a phone call. The U.S. president has been begging the Chinese president to call him for months. And so now I guess it's actually happened. Let's get the latest from Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall at the White House. So who called whom?
Well, Matt, we actually, according to China, they are saying that this was at the request of President Trump, which does track with what has been a long-held position by this White House, that they would like to see these two leaders hop on the phone directly. Now, we are still waiting on formal confirmation from the White House, but this.
Okay. Thank you for watching. This is Dr. Paul Cottrell. And we are doing a live stream on Rumble, YouTube, my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And a lot is going on in the news. We had ECB cutting rates to 25 basis points. They are saying they're getting to the end of their easing cycle. There's huge movements in the currency market. Dollar is weakening. There was lots of fluctuation during the data release, also the economic data release that we'll be going over later, plus this President Xi with Trump call. So again, in terms of equities, the accelerant to get past the 600, to get past the resistance level of 6,000 for the S&P 500, we are going to need positive results coming from the White House on tariff negotiations and out of the legislative body dealing with taxes. So those are two major sticking points for getting the equity market higher. The equity market is trading at 5,968. It is trading lower than when it went in the open. VIX is still stabilized at 17.82. Euro is trading at 1.14. Oil is trading at 63.84. I have been saying that I think the new range is around 62 handle to about a 64 handle. So we're near that top level. It may go more. There's big moves in oil today and big moves in natural gas, but it moves so much that I think it's going to mean revert. So what I did was I shorted natural gas and shorted oil. So I'm going to see how this evolves. If I start seeing additional price appreciation in the futures market, then I will start hedging my strategy. Now, BITO is trading at 21.15, and the USD Japanese yen is trading at 142.98. So there's a weakening of the dollar. That dollar weakness may be driving up oil prices, but major resistance level for oil at 65. That's for sure. What else are we looking at here? Natural gas is trading at 3.72. I think the trading range for natural gas is anywhere from 3.5 to 3.7. So I think we're on the high end of that. So that's what I'm seeing right now. So let's take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is trading, I think it was at 105. What is it? Bitcoin's trading at 105.4. And we have the yields. The 30-year yield is trading at 4.8 and the 10-year yield is trading at 4.3. So let's listen in on on Bloomberg. But before we do that, please help support my work by making sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm giving you what I'm doing. All right. Same thing with how I handle my health and, how to slow down the aging process. I tell you how I do it and you can follow along. I tell you what I'm seeing in the market and you can follow along. It's up to you. All right. So please help support my work by making sure you subscribe to all the channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe to all those channels. I do the live streams on Rumble, YouTube, and on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you'd like to support my work, either if you're domestic or international, please donate on Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. And you can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel. By being a paid member to my Patreon channel or donating, you're helping support this free coverage that I do. I have thousands of videos out there for free, informing you on my perspective of what's going on in the news. All right, so please help support my work by donating and being a paid member. I don't put stuff behind a paywall, so please help through that. For the domestic audience, if you also would like to purchase the products on my store, please do. I have ebooks, I have supplements. I also have coursework that I built up where you can learn about immunology and pulmonology. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And I will be re-releasing this broadcast through premiering later today. So let's listen back to Bloomberg.
No, we're still, as a House, we're still calling for U.S. over international. That's partially a function of the better earnings revisions breadth picture in the U.S. versus international. And it's also about the dollar. Our forecast is for 91 on the DXY, which represents around a 17% move from the highs. And that will be really beneficial for multinational companies' earnings in the U.S.
17% move down.
Yeah.
From the highs, yeah. Yeah.
All right, we got to leave it there. Unfortunately, Michelle, really great to speak with you. Hope we can do it again soon. That is Morgan Stanley's Michelle Weaver. Meanwhile, let's get a check on this market, which is taking a bit of a leg lower in the first 18 minutes of the trade. I want to take a look at the breakdown right now. When you look at the single stock level, we started out, again, in the green, but now you can see that the breadth is getting worse and worse. You have over 300 companies in the red right now, just about 174, 75 in the green. What's still leading, and this is good news, is some of your big tech names, Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, the list goes on, but very small moves overall. So that downside starting to overwhelm here, because right at the top, Tesla down almost 6%. That's taking 6 points off the big index. Nvidia too hurting as well. Then you have the likes of Costco and Eli Lilly. Let's take a look at how this is translating into the sector picture as well, because up at the top, you do have communication services, but a small move. Again, energy and materials also fighting to stay green right now. Then you go down the bottom and you absolutely have more red than green today. Financials, consumer discretionary, and consumer staples, Matt, some of the biggest laggards in this market right now.
All right, let's shift gears here for a moment and talk.
Now, if you listen to what she said, she was like, energy is having a hard time keeping the gains that they did in the pre-market session. And that's the reason why I'm shorting. I'm shorting natural gas and oil right now.
Trying to replace them with artificial intelligence. He spoke last night at the Bloomberg Tech Conference in San Francisco.
I expect we will grow from our current engineering base even into next year. I just view this as making engineers dramatically more productive, getting a lot of the mundane aspects out of what they do, allowing them to spend on higher value-added tasks. People will be able to do more, which means maybe we'll create new products, and hence we will need more people, at least in the near term.
Joining us now is Bloomberg Intelligence Global Head.
I think there is a fallacy assuming that if you can make something faster, that doesn't mean that you have more product, because there may be an S curve. How much can a family absorb, or a corporation absorb, and do they really need that software? Steve Jobs said a long time ago, Apple could go a lot faster than what they are in terms of product development and introducing revolutionary products, but there are constraints. The product absorption within the society, part of that is cognitively being able to absorb it, realizing that you may need it for your life. But another part is just financially being able to absorb the technology into your life, meaning, can you afford to purchase it? So it hits a barrier. There's a resistance to certain types of technology and adoption. Part of it's psychological. Part of it is fatigue. Part of it is the buyer behavior is focused on something else. Or it could be just financial constraints. So I'm not so sure that just because you can make it faster and with less people, that people will actually buy it.
So talk us through what you're expecting when we hear from this company after the bell.
Yeah, look, we saw NVIDIA grew 70% despite the China headwind, and they wrote down, quite almost like 7% of their revenue that they couldn't sell to China. Broadcom has a very high exposure to Google. Almost 50% of their AI revenue comes from Google TPUs. And Broadcom is a much lower run rate, $18 billion business as opposed to NVIDIA, which is almost close to $200 billion on the AI side. So clearly there's a lot of runway for Broadcom, and Broadcom last earnings mentioned they added 2 new hyperscalers. Now those 2 could be OpenAI and probably Meta or someone else, maybe they are exposed to Project Stargate. We don't know exactly, but clearly they are gaining more customers who are thinking about moving out of NVIDIA's ecosystem and doing more custom ASICs. So from that standpoint, I think any new customer they add will add, probably 10 billion plus in revenue down the line for Broadcom. And it is somewhat of a zero-sum game to my mind. If you're moving away from NVIDIA, you're probably coming to Broadcom.
All right, there you have it. And hopefully we'll be able to name those big customers.
So early in the session, I said, because the equity, the futures, the equity futures for the S&P 500 in pre-open session was moving towards 6,000. After seeing the open and the steady decline here, what's going to happen is that we're going to be probably down for the day and then stabilize. We're going to probably stabilize at probably the 5,940 mark or 60 mark for the rest of the day. We'll see. But that's my guess right now. And then they're going to wait for tomorrow for the news, and then markets are going to go wild. And everyone's keeping their powder dry.
Merchandise and a color wave in stores. So we do think that this quarter will shape out to be in line with their guidance, which is for a 6 to 7% increase. The one thing
I don't care about Lululemon. All right, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. All this stuff that I'm doing is for free for you guys. Why? Because I believe you take charge of your life, all right? And there are too many people out there that are manipulating you, all right? They're super wealthy. And it's really important to just go, okay, you need to take charge of your health. You need to take charge of your finances, and don't be a victim. We have a society that is going to be becoming more divided between the haves and the have-nots. There's this new phrase out there that I actually like the phrase, the haves and the have-yachts, all right? Now, most people, if they don't pay attention, the rich are going to take advantage of you. And on top of it, a lot of people are dumbed down because of the cell phones, and they just got their heads stuck in their doom feed, and you're going to get taken advantage of. Now, you listen to me, you're going to be okay. So let me explain the protocol that I do for my own health and wellness. And you follow me each day, and I'll give you my perspective on how to navigate through these tumultuous times. If you paid attention, you would have earned approximately about 10 to 25% on new deployed capital in the S&P 500, and even more if you did it leverage. But but you can do it any way you want. I'm just saying that when you start to see fear, you need to go in terms of markets. You need to go in. Don't be afraid. You need to go in. You get reverse psychology here. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. Very high quality that I use every day. So I have a great structural nano silver soap. You can get it in charcoal tea tree. You can get it in lemongrass. You can also get it in lavender and peppermint. That's peppermint. And this is the lavender. So please go to my store, get a couple bars for your household, very high quality soaps that I use, way better than that garbage that you may be getting at the grocery store from Procter & Gamble. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work I do. All these videos are for free. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Also, I have a great toothpaste that will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce gum inflammation, and help the health of your gum line. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this toothpaste. It is literally the best toothpaste that you can get. It has no fluoride. It's a toothpaste that I use every day. Get a couple tubes of this toothpaste for your household. Help support my work. Get a few other items. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, Bloomberg is on a break. And because they are on a break, let's go to other videos. All right, so let's listen to GB News talk. I think they're talking about Trump imposes travel ban.
The Convention on Refugees that prevents refounding.
I might have to recycle here.
Growing your business shouldn't mean growing your overhead. Growth should be seamless with AI-driven workflows built
on demand. Good luck. GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Yeah, you can, but no one likes a snitch. And I think office politics are often hard enough and enough of a minefield without getting involved. I think you have to leave it to the management.
You may have missed the live. Yeah, live.
I think trust in the process. Don't stick your nose in, because everyone always shoots the messenger. And in my experience, whenever I have flagged anything, it has normally turned around and bitten me rather nastily. So I wouldn't be getting involved.
But everybody suffers, Steve. That's my point of view. We're all being dragged down by these people who aren't pulling their weight.
Oh, I say bring on the snitch, whatever you want to call it, because at the end of the day, of course, you know, I go to work to earn my money. I don't go to work to earn your money. And coming back to the point the other contributor makes, you know, if the manager is a good manager, and let's say they are, then they'll obviously keep it confidential as well. The other thing we have to remember is that if someone is not pulling their weight, it builds up resentment. It builds up frustration
we're gonna go to CNN
and
here.
irritation. The other thing
Unfortunately, we missed the segment that I wanted to play. CNN is playing Ukraine's MP slams Trump's response to Putin's call as disgraceful.
Forward with his 3-year assault on Ukraine. A new study reveals a significant number of soldiers injured or killed. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, there have been nearly 1 million Russian casualties, with nearly half as much for Ukraine. All of this as Russian forces advance further, as we told you yesterday, broke it down by Nick Robertson, into Ukraine's Sumy region. My next guest is Ukrainian Parliament member Kira Rudik, who's here with me in London. Kira, great to have you back on the show. Look, you heard both our correspondents there. Let me start with your reaction to this call between President Putin and President Trump, and words like Nick said that painted in many ways Putin as a victim.
Hello, Isa, and thank you so much for having me here. When I read President Trump's statement, I was just asking one question. Did the leader of the democratic world just give a blessing for Putin's another attack on Ukraine? And I'm just like, this is so absurd, and this is so disgraceful for everyone who is fighting right now, but also for everyone who is watching. And the question is, why are they not more afraid? What Russia can do if Ukraine fails? By the way, we don't plan to fail. Yeah. We will continue fighting. We are not going to capitulate. But right now, trying to swap the table and paint Russia as a victim and Ukraine as an aggressor, I'm just like, is it not clear by this moment who is an aggressor and that Ukraine is defending itself? It's like, does President of the United States want to ally with Russia? Because it just doesn't seem right. None of that seems right. And the worst thing, Isa, is that people from the front line will be giving calls and asking the question of what's going on. And there is no good answer to explain to them what is happening and why is the president of the United States is saying what he's saying.
And I bumped into you upstairs just before you came down, and I could see how really visibly angry you were with those words.
Because it's not just some words, because it's basically my life, my relative's life, my neighbor's life is at stake. Every next missile, every next drone attack could be the final one for someone, for people that I love, for me personally. And this is why I'm angry, because if it was in some parallel world and we were just discussing some people, it would be one thing, but it is very real. In Ukraine, everything is very real.
I mean, Nick was saying, our diplomatic editor, you heard him there, Kira, talking about the mixed messaging we're getting from this administration. It's not the first time I've heard it. But, you know, does this sound like a president who is ready to impose sanctions on Russia? Because only 2 weeks ago, I think he said, well, give me 2 weeks to figure it out. Does this sound like a president who's prepared to put a red line, who's prepared to portray some, give Russia some stick? Because that does not sound like that to me.
It's another painful matter, Isa, because we have done everything by the book. We have done things that we said that we would never do. We have voted for this rare minerals deal, just giving away our rare minerals. President Zelensky has come to Istanbul, something that he said that he would never do, never negotiate with Putin. We have gone through everything, agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. So President Trump seemed to put pressure on Ukraine, but we have not seen him putting any kind of pressure on Russia. And it's not even mixed messages. It's a very straightforward message, which says, I will negotiate with aggressor and I will put a pressure on a victim. It is not leading us anywhere right now because there has not been any single fact that would prove that Putin wants to end the war. Because you know what these facts would be? He would just stop attacking us or he would come to negotiating table. So this illusion that you can agree with Putin on something just exists in the White House right now, alone perhaps somewhere else in Kremlin. And this is why it is so painful, because we are losing time, we are losing people, we are losing the ability to get support from the United States. And it just seems such a bad message to all the world, to all the other aggressors who are clearly watching that they can start a full-scale aggression, commit all kinds of the war crimes, and then they can delay and play around. President Trump looks very weak right now because he didn't get anything from Putin as of right now, for what he wanted from him, anything.
Where then does this leave any sort of negotiations? As you heard me saying there, Pete Hegseth wasn't there, the US Defense Secretary wasn't in these talks. You know, Ukraine Defense Minister was there, along with 50 others or so, clearly standing united with Ukraine in terms of Europeans. But what is the message that the United States is giving, and where does that leave any sort of ceasefire negotiations? Because, you know, Ukraine has showed up at every single meeting.
Yeah, we have done everything. So I think we need to come back to Munich Security Conference when J.D. Vance was very clear saying that Europe needs to take care of its own security by itself.
Yeah.
So this is where we're going.
Do you think this is where it's going? Do you think the US is going to pull out of this?
Well, let's look at the facts. Yeah. If in 2 weeks or 3 weeks we will get additional package of the military support from US, then I will be wrong. But right now, we don't know if that's going to happen.
This is what Putin wants, Kira.
Yeah, that's right. And this is why I'm asking why are people not afraid more of what's going to happen? Because again, coming back to the ceasefire question, again, the question is not answered. What will make sure, or who will make sure that Putin will keep his part of the bargain, even if there is a ceasefire? Because since 2014, Isa, we have been in so many ceasefires with them, and it never worked. It led us to the situation when Russia launched full-scale invasion. The only thing that worked for us for the last 11 years was to fight back. And this is what we are doing, and this is what we intend to do. We didn't say we want a negotiation and we believe in ceasefire. This was an illusion coming from the White House. And right now, this illusion is just breaking down.
Breaking down, Ukraine, though, has been fighting back quite ferociously, showing that it still has cards to play. Kira, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much indeed.
Smartsheet has revolutionized the way that I work, and I just can't see a day without it.
All right, we're going to go back to Bloomberg, but just to remind the audience here, please help support my work by making sure you go to my store and get the great products that I have. I'm going to tell you throughout this transmission and how to improve your health and wellness. We're going to go back to Bloomberg here. Now the S&P 500 is trading at 5,960 right now. VIX is trading at 1798. Oil is trading at 63.79 and natural gas is trading at 3.685. I've been watching this very closely here.
And Trump, don't know what they said, but that confidence seems to have wavered and evaporated right now. S&P 500, 10 points lower. That's down about 0.2%. 59.59 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average 107 points lower. The Nasdaq 100 right now down 15 points. Lots of data today. You heard that companies stocking up on stuff ahead of the tariffs, front loading. That could be over. The trade deficit narrowing in April to the smallest since 2023. And then earlier we had applications for unemployment benefits unexpectedly rising last week to the highest since October. And of course, this comes ahead of the non-farm payrolls report. Get that at 8:30 Wall Street time tomorrow. Broadcom, they reported after the close of regular trading. Those shares ahead of that, they were a little changed, but the price has surged, making it the 7th most valuable company in the S&P 500 with a market value of $1.23 trillion. So it could be a lot riding on the results that come after the close today. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul. So nice to have you in the studio.
Yeah. We came back. We decided we'd come back for you.
I missed you.
So I know it's lonely here without us, right?
Yeah, my Estella experience was fine both ways. Just a lovely way to travel.
Yeah, it feels long though.
But if you're going to pay as much as airfare for a train, why not
but the
fly?
train, you just walk direct to Penn
There's no
Station. You walk on the
TSA,
train.
there's no security. It's like, it's a different kind of stress. I'm with Paul on this one, I'm sorry. But you and Mike can fly, and Paul and I will take the train. All right, Alex Steele, alongside Paul Sweeney. We are joined now by Bloomberg's Christina Aquino to look at some of those stocks on the move today. All right, let's kick it off with Dollar Tree.
Yeah, let's take a look at Dollar Tree. I mean, those shares gaining more than 4% now, extending those opening gains. And, we did get that discount retailer warning investors that its second quarter profit could be down as much as 50% from a year ago as it deals with tariff-related costs. But then today, we have JP Morgan upgrading it to overweight from neutral. And analysts are actually...
Yeah, we're going to go over to Citibank. They're talking about the debanking days are done at Citibank. So let's just listen in there.
And the debanking days, done. Citibank announcing it is ending its restrictions on providing banking services to retail clients selling firearms. This reverses a 2018 policy that restricted services for businesses that sell guns to people under 21 years of age.
Who also happen to be adults. Citibank saying in a statement, quote, "We will no longer have a specific policy as it relates to firearms." Citibank was among the major banks, multiple major banks, accused of debanking and included Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and JP Morgan.
With us now, Unleash Prosperity Senior Fellow and Heritage Foundation Chief Economist, E.J. Antoni. E.J., it's a bit of an admission by Citibank that they came out publicly and said that first this policy. What do you make of it?
Well, Dagan, what have they been up to? Whatever the Biden administration was telling them to do. Essentially, we just had 4 years of regulatory overreach in which the federal government was browbeating all of these financial institutions into trying to conform with their own leftist ideology. In other words, if you don't put in these measures that will restrict carbon, that will restrict firearm sales, restrict, you name it, the donations to conservative organizations, any of those things, the Biden administration essentially was putting these banks into a regulatory box where the only way out was to conform, again, to whatever kind of leftist ideology the Biden administration was pushing. This whole debanking phenomenon is very real. It's very Orwellian, too. And just because it is done through regulatory maneuvers as opposed to something that's put into statute, that doesn't make it any less real to all of the people who couldn't get loans or who lost banking services more broadly.
You know, EJ, trust is a big thing, and I'm a verify, then trust. I don't want to trust and verify with these banks. What have they actually done now, and what should we watch out for to see if they slide it in some way?
Well, you're definitely going to want to keep an eye on all of these institutions because, as you just pointed out, there are ways to slide these different requirements in. So, again, it's just going to take a lot of oversight as time goes on. But I actually have a lot of confidence that these banks, with someone like President Trump in charge, that these banks are, in fact, going to move away from this liberal agenda because it's just not profitable. Look, it's not profitable to deny, for example, a fossil fuel company, money to build a new refinery or to build a pipeline or to build a rail line so that we can transport coal from a mine to a power plant, et cetera. All of these different ventures, the banks only chose not to finance them, or the banks chose to essentially debank these individuals specifically because regulators were forcing them to do so. They would not have done so but for government overreach.
It has started Operation Choke Point, Obama-era Department of Justice working with the FDIC, going after payday lenders and, firearms dealers. And under Biden, they also shut down crypto firms, destroyed whole families intentionally. Biden and his financial regulators, it's foul, disgusting what they did to entrepreneurs in this country and tried to hide it. EJ, moving on to this, President Trump ramping up the pressure on old Jay Powell to cut interest rates, which he still refuses to do. Writing on Truth Social, quote, ADP number out, too late. Powell must now lower the rate. He is unbelievable. Europe has lowered 9 times. Not one rate cut this year yet, EJ and Tony, but they cut 3 times last year. Political favor for Kamala Harris even before the election. But now you look at longer term rates, the 2-year and the 10-year, they're lower. Longer term rates are lower than the overnight lending rate now. And inflation is the lowest in 4 years.
Right, Dagan? I mean, look, even if you want to use the Keynesian models of the Fed, which I think are completely erroneous, but even if you want to just stick with the Fed's own methodology, that is telling the Fed that it is time to cut. You know, Slow Jerome, essentially, he was so quick to cut interest rates, as you pointed out, right before the election, when the inflation numbers were worse than they are today. The inflation outlook was worse, except they did it for political convenience. Now, fast forward to today, the only thing that has really changed is that you have a president who's a Republican instead of a Democrat. But other than that, all of the indicators, again, that the Fed themselves likes to look at, whether it's the labor market, whether it's GDP, whether it's the inflation numbers, you name it, all of their own indicators that they say they pay attention to are more in favor of a cut today than they were last fall. So again, I think it's very difficult to say there's any motivation here other than political. It's certainly not economical.
Yeah, he's certainly not talking to the Atlanta Fed or anyone else out there who's showing the numbers different. The conditions were there. We've talked about this before back in December with that cut. Right now, do you think the Feds will the individual Feds, Atlanta, Denver, whoever, will put more pressure on Powell because he's not going anywhere?
You know, unfortunately, because of the way the Fed is set up today, there's really very little that those individual regional banks can do to put pressure on the board here in D.C. You know, the Fed today is a far cry from what it was when it was first set up in the 1910s. So unfortunately, no matter how much those different regional Fed bank presidents, again, try to pressure Powell, at the end of the day, the power is here in Washington. And that's a very, very unfortunate thing.
And thank you, EJ, for that stat about the borrowing and the Treasury replenishing its account when the debt ceiling goes up. $38 trillion national debt by September. That's all you, my friend, EJ and Tony. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks, EJ.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
The future of performance.
We're going to go back to Bloomberg here.
Protect their margins, and part of it is they're probably testing the waters. We saw in the last inflation, when it started, people were raising prices more than their costs were going up because they hadn't been able to raise prices in years. And so they were taking advantage of it. And maybe that's a little bit of what we're seeing now. There have been some studies out recently that suggest that when Trump announced the tariffs, people raised some prices. Then when he put the 90-day hold on it, they didn't lower those prices. So businesses are maybe not anxious to test whether they lose market share, but they're willing to do it if they think that things are going to continue in that direction.
All right. Mike, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Economics and Policy Correspondent. Also, I lost my kid. So if you say, oh no, she's back.
Yeah, she's back.
I didn't know she was
She's-
back. I was
she's
like,
right
can you go get my daughter for me who's
Yeah.
roaming around the office? Never mind.
No.
Oh, she snuck in very quietly. Look at that. All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. And then, of course, Jobs Friday tomorrow going to be quite interesting. We typically wind up seeing actually the S&P up on Jobs Day. Tariffs over at the desk made a really good chart on that. So we'll see if that holds.
I'll tell you how
for
important
today.
tomorrow's Jobs Day is. I'm coming in tomorrow.
Yeah, that's because it's raining. I don't think this is actually like a really good indicator. It's because it's like I'm gonna save my.
The jobs day tomorrow is going to be market moving. I think we're probably going to start seeing the markets dying down at about maybe 12 o'clock, and then everyone's going to be waiting for tomorrow.
Also, apparently there was a talk between President Trump and President Xi, according to Chinese reports. So we will discuss the latest on that. This is Bloomberg.
All right, so we're going to play a video here from the Hill talking about Putin warns Trump in phone call. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I have. I have these great deodorants that are dual purpose. You use it as a deodorant every day. It's for males and females, but it'll also help to detoxify your body. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, no aluminum, no baking soda, all natural ingredients, very high quality. Again, it's used as a deodorant and it will help to detoxify your body. You can get it in citrus and also in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. So please go to my store, get a couple bars for your household, use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Our job is to create a series of
President Trump said his phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday brought both good news and bad news.
Trump took to Truth Social and wrote in part, "It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace." President Putin did say very strongly that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. The two also discussed Iran. Trump continued, "I stated to President Putin that Iran cannot have a weapon. And on this, I believe that we were in agreement." President Putin suggested he will participate in the discussion and that he could perhaps be helpful in getting this brought to a wrap.
Criticized Trump on X, writing, quote, "Russia has been receiving drones and ballistic missiles from Iran to use in its kidnapping of Ukraine. Iran and Russia are partners. It is ludicrous to think we would allow Putin to be a chief negotiator between the U.S. and Iran on the Iran deal in exchange for the U.S. helping Russia with Ukraine."
Senator Lindsey Graham, meanwhile, wrote, "I have always believed that Donald Trump is the best person, maybe the only person who can end the war between Russia and Ukraine honorably and justly. I appreciate the fact that President Trump has gone the extra mile by engaging Putin in a positive way to try to get him to come to the table. I have always supported this approach, but to make peace, you have to have willing partners."
Yeah, I don't think Nikki Haley knows what she's talking about, and
Oh, I
she would like to see she would like to see an all-out confrontation with Iran. She's been agitating for it her entire professional career. I think avoiding that larger conflagration is the #1 and most paramount goal of foreign policy. So if Vladimir Putin can play a role in not having all-out war with Iran, that's a good thing to me.
Trump said a lot of stuff on Truth Social yesterday about his conversation with Vladimir Putin. But what he didn't say is what stuck out to me the most. I'm really trying to understand how you sit on the phone with somebody who's a dictator for 75 minutes and say, oh, we had good and bad news. The conversation was okay. He didn't scream at any point and say, no, Vladimir, stop. Do not attack Ukraine.
Because he's an adult.
Yeah, no.
Just scream, don't attack Ukraine.
I talk
We're all doing that. It doesn't do anything.
I said, no, it's not. It's problematic to greenlight a dictator. And that's what it looks like to the rest of the world, that we're saying, go ahead. We understand you have to retaliate. No, we need to condemn retaliatory threats, especially when they're coming from Russia, because Ukraine attacked military aircraft, not civilians. And Russia's killing civilians. Ukraine is just defending themselves after an aggressor came in and tried to take over their country. And so we're supposed to be supporting Ukraine in this and saying, listen, this needs to stop. But by egging, Putin on and not saying anything and saying, oh, good and bad news came out of this, that is not the same strength in the great negotiator that everyone thought they were getting and voted for on the campaign trail that said this would be stopped immediately and that he was the only one that can do it. I think everybody's watching this play out and watching now this being their third conversation. They had one a couple weeks ago. They had one in February. And then he's bombing Ukraine right after that and saying, oh, the U.S. has no backbone. They're not going to do anything. They're going to continue to cower and not only say Ukraine should accept all the terms of Russia's suggestion that they laid out on the table, which is very biased, but they should also allow Ukraine to be the key negotiator in anything that has to do with Iran, which is ridiculous.
If thunderous denunciation of Vladimir Putin was going to end this war, then it would have ended during the Joe Biden presidency, as we remain committed to, yes, looking tough and strong and reminding the international community that Putin's a bad guy and we don't like what Russia's doing. That doesn't work. It's not helpful. We need a little bit more thoughtful and sophisticated engagement with Vladimir Putin. Doesn't mean he's a good guy.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead. Do whatever you like. That's fine. I understand.
You should just
while at the same time condemning Ukraine?
We have to it's a little bit more complicated than just good guys and bad guys. And we just yell about bad guys and we go to war with bad guys. The world is a complicated place. There's a lot of regimes and countries that we don't like everything they do, but we ally with them sometimes because they're bigger guys we don't like, and the situation changes and it's messy, and that's the reality of global politics. My goal is to bring the conflict to an end, to stop the loss of life of both Russians and, of course, the thousands and thousands of Ukrainians who are dying. I hope there is anyone left alive in Ukraine by the time this war is over. The war will only end with a peace settlement that is maximally favorable to Russia, because Russia is slowly conquering the country, and the Biden approach of just supplying Ukraine with any weapons it needs to fight back is just resulting in the slow conquest of the country. Now, you did not hear me complain about Ukraine doing this military exercise and defending itself, because unlike some people on the right, I don't take the position that Ukraine has no position to defend itself. Of course they can defend themselves. They are entitled to defend themselves. Any nation that is attacked can defend itself. That's fine. We should offer them moral support. We are not obligated to support them militarily. Our role should be to facilitate diplomacy, and that's what Trump is trying to do. It's a difficult thing to do because of the position Joe Biden put him in vis-a-vis the previous foreign policy.
The blame game, everything is on Joe Biden. We understand, we hear you, but I think it's time to have a real conversation about where America used to be. Democrats and Republicans used to stand firm against anti-democratic aggression, which this is, that Vladimir Putin is doing to Ukraine. And there used to be a uniformity in our government that says we wouldn't allow this type of...
Should we say to Iran,
we would just, no, at least change
go to hell, we're going to blow you up if you try to develop a nuclear weapon, and then we actually have to do it?
No, we should change the tone around Putin and stop making it an equal thing between what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, and we should talk to them very firmly and say that we are going to continue to support Ukraine until this becomes a stalemate, because nobody wants a nuclear war. So I don't also think that Russia's actually thinking about pressing the big red button, and neither do I think Trump is. And so I don't think that Russia wants to continue to stay in this war and spend all their money either. And just like I don't think Ukraine wants to continue to fight and let people die and have a much weaker military force than Russia. So at some point, both of them have to come to the table. 2 Chinese nationals are charged with smuggling a dangerous biological pathogen into the U.S. with the ability to cause devastating diseases in our crops. We'll discuss next.
Are you getting the runaround from workers' comp after your work injury? You're not alone. A lot of injured workers are stuck in a system that's confusing, frustrating, and honestly just plain unfair. Maybe your job rushed you back too soon. Maybe your doctor doesn't
as to who is kind of holding what narrative. We know that on the side of China that they had actually indicated that President Trump had initiated the call. So there's some interesting things going on there in terms of which narrative do we want to have, who started it, who reached out first. So now we're waiting to hear how President Trump describes it, and of course hoping for as much detail as possible as to what they talked about and really what that means going forward when it comes to trade. Of course, we have spoken on our side. Sources have been telling us, that there are a number of countries on the table. Officials have been coming out publicly as well. Some are saying India, and there's been some talk about the EU. But for all of them, China is really, really important, and so this could really be the next step in figuring out what comes next with regard to trade between the two countries.
What are the sticking points? I mean, there are a lot, but what's the main sticking point at this time?
Right. I mean, there's, as you mentioned, so many things. There's a lot with minerals. That's something that we are still trying to get a little bit more info out of. Some things that there have been more kind of hostile relations just in the past few days, of course, with what's been going on with the president in terms of his immigration agenda. Most recently, putting out this statement that foreign students, from China being one of the groups impacted with regard to this student visa ban. As you know, on the immigration front, where the focus of most of my reporting, there has really been kind of a ramping up on the kind of education front. Of course, Harvard taking being the main kind of target from the president and really trying to bring back or kind of restrict the number of foreign students coming in as we see a rise in these instances tied to anti-Semitism. And of course, now last night, we have this travel ban, which has an additional dozen or so countries on it. And that, again, is really the kind of latest step in terms of the president's immigration agenda.
Adriana, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Adriana Lowenkron, White House reporter for Bloomberg News. We will look for some confirmation from the White House on whether the President Trump and President Xi did in fact hold that call. And we get that, we will bring that to you. Let's get back to these markets here. We want to check in with Nancy Daoud, private wealth advisor, Ameriprise Financial. It's interesting, Nancy, we've had almost a full retracement in the S&P 500 from the sell-off earlier this year, due in part to some of the rollouts of those tariffs. What's the conversation like with your clients today? Are they just kind of whipsawed? What do they want to talk about?
Well, it really is the realization, or maybe I should put it more like it's a desensitization at this point, because at first when on Liberation Day, when everything was rolled out, it was a shock to the system. There's a very big change here, and human behavior doesn't respond well to change. Even when we know it's a good thing, but we don't really know if it's a good or a bad thing at this point, but it's still a change. And at this point, because the pattern has become somewhat predictable, where there's something crazy that happens or a very big announcement that turns the world upside down, usually through social media, then there's a pullback with a negotiation period, which allows investors or the market to breathe a little bit. And then there's the actual negotiation. So it's kind of like the Trump tariffs 3-step process that has now almost become predictable. So investors are feeling a little more comfortable with it. And of course, it doesn't hurt that the S&P is back almost up to its all-time highs again.
Well, to that point, actually, Charlie McGillicott over at Nomura had a really interesting quote. He said something along the lines of like, if you had bought buy the dip, betting against the S&P futures every time President Donald Trump escalated trade rhetoric and then buying them back 5 days later would have yielded you 12% versus flat for the broader S&P since the beginning of February, like to your exact point. Okay.
If you were following me for the last 7 weeks, you would have earned 10 to about 25%, depending on your entry point and how you were dollar cost average. It's very simple. Don't bet against America. If you just have that simple rule, don't bet against the United States with the broader index. All right. And that it's going to be moving up. There's just such inertia with the U.S. economy that yes, there's going to be, down cycles and all this, but that's when you want to accumulate. So when you're gaining yield when the up cycle comes back. I mean, that's pretty much how Warren Buffett does it. Now he dives into more, at the individual company level. He's more of a fundamental trader or investor, I should say. But yeah, there was too many people that ran for the hills when this was happening.
2026. The jobs, we don't know what the report will say tomorrow, but it looks pretty solid. And the consumer balance sheets and spending is still pretty solid. So
Nancy,
that's the data.
Yeah, and Nancy, it's interesting that Alex and I just spent the past couple of days at a wealth manager conference, and I think we were both surprised that when we talk about portfolios, alternatives make up a much bigger part than maybe we had originally thought. How do you position alternatives investments, whether it's private equity, private credit, hedge funds, that kind of thing, for your clients?
Well, alternatives absolutely have a place in every portfolio to the tune of at least 10 to 20%, depending on the portfolio and the risk involved. And the most important reason is because alternatives, by definition, are not correlated to stocks and bonds. So when all hell breaks loose, so to speak, those will prevail, hopefully. So it definitely has a place in everybody's portfolio, but it just depends on the time frame of the investment and the appetite for risk of the investor.
What do you think about, say, gold, for example, right? Like it's not a typical alternative, right? But it has been a real stalwart in this environment. Do you think, are you recommending clients to sort of increase that exposure?
Not necessarily gold specifically, but in general, commodities, there's a small amount of percentage of each portfolio that should have some commodities, again, just as a hedge, but not specifically gold.
All right, Nancy. All right, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Nancy Daoud, private wealth advisor for Ameriprise Financial. And again, I just kind of go back to what we learned over the last couple of days at PNC. These people are talking about derivative alternative investments in a pretty big way.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Remember there was
I
someone that
don't
said
even think I have
50%
that.
was
Yeah.
like some allocation. I was like, oh my gosh, for some of the big guys.
Well, I was shocked when I first got down to the Duke board to find out how much is allocated there. And that's kind of the Yale model where they go 50%, something like that. I was like, really?
I mean, you just have to then think like, are the risks well known? Like, are you knowledgeably exchanging liquidity for yield? And if that's the case, then that's great, right? I mean, as long as everyone is on the same page, understanding what you're giving up and what you're getting at the same time. Here's what I'm going to be getting. I'm going to be getting a conversation in power. Oh, yes. We heard the Meta and Constellation Energy deal the other day. That was a big deal for nuclear power. Meta Platforms also announced a deal today to get green credits from a U.S. solar energy project. We are going to talk to the company behind that project. The founder and CEO of Invenergy will be joining us, Mike Polsky, coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer. This is a product that is it's a dual purpose. It's going to help with your immune system and your brain function. So get the magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc boosts up that immune system, but also magnesium helps with brain function. Super important. In addition, magnesium increases the efficacy of D3, vitamin D3. So please go to my store and get the magnesium and zinc. Make sure you take it every day. and boost up that immune system and your brain function. Now, let's talk about a foundational supplement that's important to add to your protocol, and that is the multivitamin. This multivitamin is easy to digest, and it has the multivitamins that you need for enzymatic activity. Enzymes, many of them, need cofactors, and some of those cofactors are or vitamins, so taking a multivitamin is going to give you the cofactors that you need for that enzymatic activity. And so when those enzymes are functioning more and functioning properly, then your cellular processes are going to function properly. So that's really important at the cellular level and at the tissue level. So if your tissues are performing better, then your organ systems are going to perform better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take this multivitamin as a foundational part of a health protocol. So go to my store, get this multivitamin. It's easy to digest. Now, another part of that foundational health protocol is the probiotic. Now, I have two types of probiotics. You can get it in the veggie cap, which is what's in my hand, or in the powdered form. I take the powdered form because I take a lot of different powdered supplements like the collagen and the lignans and the gladiator barley and the boomer boost. So it's easier for me to take the powdered version. But either way, take the veggie cap or the powdered version. Both are very high quality probiotics. Now with taking a probiotic, what's going to happen is that you're going to notice your skin's going to be better. It's going to be healthier. What you'll also notice is that you'll be less irritable and you'll have better concentration. And then at the gut level, you're going to start seeing that you're digesting your food better, you're absorbing your nutrients better, you're bringing down GI inflammation, you're boosting up that immune system in that area. Your mucosal lining is actually going to be thicker and healthier. And so your IgA will have higher concentrations. And your overall digestive health is going to improve. The communication between your gut and your liver is going to improve, and your gut and your brain. So please go to my store and get the probiotic. I have it in the veggie cap version and the powdered version. And like I said, that's your foundational stack, part of your stack, and then you add to it. So get the probiotic and the multivitamin. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Now, if you're an international watcher, unfortunately, I don't ship internationally. But if you would like to help support my work, you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee, or be a paid member to my Patreon channel. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. Now, let me do a market update here. The S&P 500 is trading at 5,968. VIX is trading at 1770. Euro is trading at 114. Oil is trading at 63.74. BITO is trading at 20.93. Japanese yen is trading at 143.39. Natural gas is trading at 3.652. Now, what I would like to bring up with oil is that oil seems to be trading at the high end of a range. And I think that new range is around with a 62 handle with a 64 handle. And right now it's at a 63.72. So I'm looking, at this pretty closely, and I placed a short in the oil market, and also I shorted natural gas. I think the natural gas trading range is around 3.5 to 3.7. It's trading at 3.64.
It's this Bloomberg Business Flash. Right now, the major averages kind of mixed. The NASDAQ 100 just turned positive, up 25 points, up 0.1%. The S&P 500, 6 points lower. That's down 0.1%, 59.64 on the index. And the Dow is 69 points lower. So we're getting some headlines, a little more detail on that phone call between President Xi Jinping of China and President Trump this morning, which was initially reported by the Xinhua news agency. So here's the headline. Xi tells Trump U.S. should remove negative measures on China. Take that for what it's worth. Added attention on the non-farm payrolls report. That's out tomorrow morning after applications for U.S. unemployment benefits unexpectedly rose to the highest since October. That points to cooling. Initial claims increasing by 8,000 to 247,000. Multiple large companies, this includes Microsoft, Walt Disney, and Booz Allen Hamilton Holding, have recently said they're cutting jobs. Planet Labs, that is popping off the screen. A record jump this morning. The company's first quarter revenue topping expectations. Those shares right now, Planet Labs, 60% higher in this morning's trading. Kimberly-Clark forming a joint venture with a Brazilian pulp supplier. Kimberly-Clark selling a majority stake in their global Kleenex and tissue business. This is outside of North America. And starting today, this is one that gets my blood boiling. Customers across the country can order stuff from 1,500 Five Below stores through Uber Eats app and then have them delivered directly to. Now, the whole idea of going to Five Below is to save money on these little items, and then you pay Uber apps to have it delivered.
That's why you're spending the money, because you're then paying Uber apps.
I just want to let me just put it out there. If this happens at my house, I'm going to have a stroke, and you know who I'm talking to.
Yes.
Anyway, we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Alex and Paul.
All right. Thanks so much, John Tucker. Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We're broadcasting to you live from our interactive broker studio right here in Midtown Manhattan. Also check us out on YouTube as well. So the news that came out on Tuesday was that Meta and Constellation Energy met what they call a virtual purchase power agreement. So it's basically an investment to secure clean energy from Constellation, but there are lots of different nuances to that. They're not the only one out there. Today we also learned that, back in December, Meta Platforms also announced a deal to buy green credits from 4 large U.S. solar energy projects. And the owner of that project joins us now. Michael Polsky is founder and CEO of Invenergy. And Invenergy is one of the biggest, largest independent power producers in the United States, nat gas plants, solar, onshore, offshore wind, storage, as well as transmission, really has his pulse on the market right now. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. And we have to add natural gas as well.
Yes, no, I said that. I said natural gas. I did. Plants. So you have all that clean stuff. How hard is it to reach these agreements with the hyperscalers right now? What are those conversations like?
Obviously, these are large-scale agreements, so it's not easy to just walk in and these are those big deals. So, first of all, we have to make sure that both sides, so that we agree on that, suppliers have sufficient supplies and satisfy buyer requirements. Is what is also important that certain reliability standards are being met, and most importantly, the pricing has to be appropriate for a buyer to agree to buy this.
Another headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. President Xi, President Trump agreed to start new round of talks ASAP. That's according to CCTV. We'll bring you continued reporting on that. Michael, is the Trump administration making your business, the development of your business, the expansion of your business easier, more difficult? No real impact yet? What have you seen?
Clearly, the administration sent very right sign. President announced energy emergency, which I believe there is an energy emergency because we have to build, there is increased demand and we have to build more supplies, and more supplies we have to build. If we build like we used to do it, it would take too long. Emergency is possible. What is also very important, not just supply, but transmission. I mean, one of our biggest developments right now
with our templates, market
more transmission lines. I always like to say that, if we build more trucks without roads, not going to deliver goods. So in order for electrons to move, we need transmission lines. And if we have transmission, then we can shorten time to interconnect facility. We have to be able to move power from where it's produced to where it's used. And I think we can really build infrastructure a lot faster here and with a lot more impact.
Devine, to your point, Goldman Sachs had a note out today talking about how power is already tight in the Northeast. There was a report out yesterday that said the development of data centers to the largest U.S. grid and PG cost $10 billion because we just can't reimagining transmission.
I think there are multiple. One is obviously permitting because it takes forever permit and
fixed now. Has that all been fixed?
I mean it's in the process. Obviously there are good announcements with implemented because implementation is very important. But it's not just permitting. I think transmission has to be appropriately paid for. And right now, particularly for long distance transmission, we don't have a methodology in this country how to pay for transmission. So there's a lot of intention to build, and the only really transmission being built, the one that recovered by utilities or RTOs through the ratepayer. The moment you touch something that is not typically normal, then it's very difficult. So we have to really come up with appropriate methodology to value transmission and allocate the cost of transmission. I think, in my opinion, for this administration, for Department of Energy, that should be really one of the most important tests to build our infrastructure.
Did read the book.
Here it is.
I did read the book, The Grid. So it took me a whole summer to get through it, and it was not an easy read, but I think I have some understanding of it. What's your sense overall of the power grid in the United States? How good is it? How bad is it? How much investment does it need?
Obviously, there are a lot of discussions about grid right now. They're being used like antiquated, old, not reliable, which is true in many ways because most of our grid has been built 30, 40 years ago. And there are a lot of change since then. I mean, for example, we used to have very centralized way of generating electricity from very large coal, nuclear, sometimes gas power plants. Now we have a lot more decentralized generation, number one. Another issue is that our weather pattern has changed. I mean, now we have a lot more, inclement weather. We have ice storms, which we've seen in Texas. We have floods. We have other weather events, which shows that generation itself is susceptible. We cannot make 100% sort of guaranteed generation. So how to deal with this? We have to connect, I like to call larger geography. So power can move from here to there, just like roads, right? If we only go from here to there on one road, and then something happened with that road, and we cannot avoid that, then all the traffic will be stopped for days. We can't avoid this. So we have to have transmission. But
based on that, you said the sort of financing the transmission is key. How would that work? I get it for the regulated utilities, but if you wanted a transmission line across multiple states, how could the financing work to make sense for an independent player like you?
This is a fundamental problem here, right? We in the United States, we talk about the reliability, we talk about national security, but for example, we develop a large transmission line, and which dramatically increase reliability. But then you go to the RTOs like MISO and ask them to value reliability, and they just don't value this because neither they know how to do it or they simply don't want to do it. So this is a fundamental problem that, when you build transmission, for example, in our case, Grain Belt Express is $11 billion project. We have to have revenues associated in order to finance this. And if nobody wants to pay for anything, it's really hard. So I think it should be a priority for the government to really establish revenue streams for transmission.
All right, so let's take a look at some other news that's going on here. GOP rep draws parallels between Cold War and the U.S.-China relations. We'll listen to that. But before we do, protecting your neurons are extremely important when you get age 40. So if you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking the stack. Really important, extremely important. All right. Now, I think because of modern society and some of the things that have happened in recent years, there's going to be more people that have cognitive decline. All right. Part of it's because of cell phone use. Part of it is society is going to be more reliant on AI and they're not thinking. We're in do mode and not really think mode. And a lot of people aren't learning new things. So it's really important as a holistic approach to make sure you detoxify your environment and stay away from overuse of technology, especially cell phones, and do the proper supplementation and proper diet and exercise. So in terms of the supplementation, you want to get the NAD+. NAD+ is a supplement that will boost up your NAD+ levels, and NAD+ helps to repair DNA damage. In addition, it helps to protect neurons. And stack it with ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase. So please go to my store and get this ubiquinol. And with ubiquinol, what's going to happen is it's going to soak up free radicals, help with the health of the mitochondria. You're going to have more energy, and it helps to protect neurons. So stack them together. Now, you can stack also NAD+ and ubiquinol with resveratrol, C60, clarity factor. These are all very powerful stacks to help with your neurological system. Also, vitamin B is very important. So you can stack the vitamin B complex with ubiquinol and NAD+. And these are things that I take every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get those supplements, follow the holistic approach, and slow down the aging process and improve different systems that you're targeting. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. So let's listen to this video on Fox Business.
Trump signing a new proclamation banning travel from more than 12 countries deemed national security risks and public safety threats. This list includes Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, all labeled as very high risk due to terrorist activity and weak or hostile governments. Venezuela, Cuba, and Laos all facing partial restrictions. The president also suspending any foreign student entering the country looking to study at Harvard. Joining me now is Kentucky Congressman Brett Guthrie. He's the chairman of the Energy Commerce Committee. And Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for being here this morning. Before I get to the energy space, I want to get your thoughts on this travel ban from the president last night. Your reaction?
Well, I agree with that. I think that we have all of these incidents we're seeing here in the United States, just terrible tragedies. My heart is out to the families that have been affected by these terrorist acts in our country. And the president said he's going to protect the country from terrorists. You know, he's trying to deport the families of terrorists as well. So I agree with exactly what he's doing.
Well, I'm wondering, about China and whether or not the president needs to get tougher on travel to and from China, given the fact that Chinese researchers had this plot to smuggle a crop-killing fungus into America. The FBI says this is incredibly serious. How do you see it?
I see the same thing. I think we have to look at how we deal with China in everything that we do. We're looking at AI in our committee and how China is trying to dominate AI in the world. And I think China is our number one focus that we have to have, and so I strongly support anything we can do to ban that type of thing from China.
Well, I mean, look, the list is growing here. You got a surveillance balloon a couple of years ago surveilling American citizens. You got intellectual property theft, COVID, fentanyl, and now an agro-terrorist product.
Well, just think if that country that you just described, who's done all of that, dominates the world platform for AI. That is actually what our committee has been focused on. Other than the one big beautiful bill, the other big focus on our committee is how do we unleash American AI? And the biggest issue that you talk to people in the AI community, they say we have the brain power, we have the capital. Our biggest concern, are we going to have access to energy? And are we going to have access to a regulatory system that allows us to compete and allows us to win? And it absolutely is a geopolitical issue. I don't think I'm too strong. I went to West Point, so in the 1980s, I don't think it's equivalent to when the Soviet Union and the battle for Western Europe in the Cold War. That's where we are with China now, and we need to take it that serious.
Well, I guess the next question becomes, are we not funding it, right? I mean, look at all the Chinese stocks that are traded on U.S. exchanges. I've done several specials on this for Fox Nation called Underwriting the Enemy. And, you know, as an elected official, do you need to do more in terms of taking those companies out of the U.S. exchanges, pulling some economic levers here to stop China? Because are we not funding all of this?
Well, I strongly support anything we can do to stop China. So that specifically, I don't have the knowledge right now to give you the exact answer on that, but anything on China, what we're focused on, we do know that they are trying to dominate the world with AI.
Yeah.
And so we are struggling to make sure that we, in our committee, to try to get a bipartisan agreement, because if energy policy changes every 2 to 4 years, then it's difficult for Americans to invest and to grow our energy. And so we're trying to find that pathway forward, because we know that if the delta between what China energy growth and our energy growth is just astronomical, and that's going to absolutely affect our ability to compete.
Well, that is the reason that President Trump has all hands on deck when it comes to energy, including investment in nuclear. Before we move on, I want to get your take on the debt limit. But before we move on, let me show you the conversation between the woman who was at the University of Michigan and her boyfriend. The boyfriend, Lee, says, where did the seeds get put? In the tube? Jean, who's the student from Michigan, says, I put them in my Martin boots in a small bag, the Ziploc bag, very small. Lee says, that's good, just put it in your shoes. Jean says, I stuffed them in the shoes. They continue this conversation, the couple. Lee says, Teacher Lang's seeds must be placed well. So the teacher gave them the seeds to bring here, it sounds like. Jean says, where to put it? I only have one pair of shoes. The insole cannot be pulled off. Lee says, did you bring just one pair of shoes? Jean says, no, 3 pairs. I'm wearing 1 pair. I mean, this is a conversation, and this transcription, it was released by the FBI. This is just extraordinary. The hearing is going on today at 1 o'clock. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Michigan told Fox News that Jean is still in custody pending the hearing. The public defender is currently representing her, though she's trying to retain private counsel. Do you have any expectations for this hearing today?
Well, I certainly have expectations that the Trump administration and the Trump Justice Department is going to take full action. That's something we haven't seen in the past 4 years. We have to, this absolutely is one big piece of the puzzle that we put together to say China is a direct threat to us. And we have, as you talked about investment earlier, companies invested in China, China investing here. We have to realize that we can't continue to do that. Right. We have to define the situation as it is, and we have to take every action that we can. And I don't want to keep repeating, but could you imagine if the country you just described dominated the world platform for AI? We actually had a hearing the other day. There was a medical device made in China implanted in a person that had a URL code back to the University of Beijing. So if anything that we have coming from China, we have to take as seriously as that situation you just described.
Wow. Well, look, President Trump is going to speak with Xi Jinping this week. I hope one of the leading points of their discussion is this, and these unending efforts to undermine and undo America by the Chinese Communist Party. I hope the president has that on his list to talk with Xi Jinping, in addition to the trade issues, which I suspect.
We are living in interesting times. I think Trump's attack on Harvard and some of the other universities is going right to the heart of the matter. It's not so much the anti-Semitism. That's a sideshow. What's really going on is the infiltration of the CCP in our institutions. All right, let's go to Bloomberg here.
Trump loving culture warriors. So there you go.
All right. For our listeners in the U.S., here's a reminder. You can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM channel 121. Access the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio.
All right. They're going on a commercial break, so we'll do another video. But before we do that, let's talk about that vitamin B complex. All right. Vitamin B complex will help with your mitochondrial health. The first 4 B vitamins helps with mitochondrial health. It will boost up those ATP levels so you'll have energy. If you notice that people that get older, their energy levels go down, their mitochondrial health goes down, their neurons start to go down, the firing of the neurons start to go down, their concentration goes down, they have atrophy, their bone density goes down. So there's ways to mitigate all these issues, all right? So let's just talk about the energy boosting part of this. So Vitamin B complex should be taken if you're 40 years of age or older to improve the health of your mitochondria and get those mitochondria boosting up those ATPs in all the different tissues, including your neurons. You're going to have more energy. That's really important. Now, it also helps with cellular metabolism. And the B12 vitamin is going to help with protecting neurons. So please follow my advice. Take the vitamin B complex every day, drink it with filtered water, do resistance training, cardio, balancing exercises, and stretching exercises. Those are all 4 modalities are important for your body in general, but also for your brain. Cardio is good for your brain because you're getting better blood flow. And you are activating those baroreceptors and chemoreceptors. All right, that helps to control the blood pressure. In addition, by doing stretching exercises and balancing exercises, you're activating the cerebellum, really important. And you're training your body to be balanced. In the kinematics, that's important. In addition, stretching activates the neurons that are attached at the ends of the muscle. While you're doing the resistance training and you're building muscle, but you're activating a different set of neurons that actually are doing the contraction. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin B complex, take it every day if you're 40 years of age or older, and apply the holistic approach to health. Proper diet, proper exercise, filter your water, stay away from processed foods, do the 4 modalities of exercise, get proper sleep, proper supplementation, learn new things. And if you apply this on a regular basis, you're actually holistically healing your body. All right? It's really simple. It's really simple. But if you go down the path of, having problems, chronic problems, then it's harder to get you back into homeostasis. It's easier to handle it before you have a problem than when you do have a problem. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
In modern times.
Patrick Fruzetti of Rose Advisors interviewed this morning on surveillance. Procter & Gamble plans to slash as many as 7,000 office jobs over the next.
Breaking news, Danish central bank cuts rate to 1.6 from 1.85. So Danish bank is lowering their reserve rate.
The Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. I'm Paul Sweeney with Alex Steele, and we're joined by Bloomberg's Isabel Lee. Isabel, what do you got?
Look at Chewy, ticker CHWY. So shares are flat now, around 0.9%. It was down pre-market, but I guess that they paired some of those losses. So we have Jefferies cutting the recommendation to hold. Jeffrey said that valuation appears prime for a first quarter beat and that a raise is unlikely to happen. They also said that the pet macro looks relatively stable and Chewy's performing well, but the CFO change underway is a little concerning. So in May, recall that Chewy announced that its CFO, David Reeder, will depart in several months, and as he really comes to lead a semiconductor company called Entegris. So some in Wall Streets were really disappointed that he left. So this is one of those examples that, you're sad to see a leader go.
True, but aren't we like, so invest in your face and invest in your pets? Like, aren't those the two things?
That's what I thought.
I'm about to learn that.
Oh, he's getting a puppy.
Really?
Oh my
First
God.
pet in my entire life.
What breed?
Australian Labradoodle.
Oh my gosh.
The pictures of the
Very
puppy
cute.
is like to die for. Okay, Dollar Tree.
Dollar Tree. So ticker is DLTR. Shares are rising more than 7%. And that's after JP Morgan upgraded the stock to overweight. So the move comes again in the wake of the company's results when it warned about the impacts of tariffs. We have JP Morgan analysts saying it sees a lot of positives in the results. So Dollar Tree shouldn't be confused with Dollar General. We have Dollar Tree warning investors that its second quarter profit could be down as much as 50% this year. And that's in contrast to Dollar General, which reported really good earnings. So Dollar General generates around 80% of its sales from food and consumer goods, but Dollar Tree gets just half of its revenue from those categories. Anyway, it was just interesting to me that these two dollar stores really have this huge disparity. And it just makes you realize that there's really a lot under the hood when it comes to these companies.
And rounding it out, Planet Labs.
This one, the ticker is PL. I had to take a double
And
look.
what is Planet Labs again?
It's an Earth imaging company. And I had to take a double look because shares are up almost 60%. That's a record jump. So company's first revenue quarter topped expectations. We have Citizens analysts saying that the company had a stellar quarter and the stock remains an opportunity for long-term capital appreciation. So it's interesting because this comes as Europe hikes defense spending in response to a pullback from the US. And we have the CEO, Will Marshall, saying that European demand for satellite data is higher now than it was during the onset of the Ukraine war. So with the change dynamics in the US, the CEO said that they're trying to pick up more of that capability themselves. So good for them because they're going to be producing probably a lot of imaging. Their earnings, including some items, were $1.2 million this quarter. And that's after analysts were expecting a $3 million loss. So,
all right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Isabel Lee joining us from Bloomberg News. For more conversations just like this, subscribe to our new Stock Movers reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports and the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen. And also Deep T's, the Spire Global CEO, will be joining us. They provide space-based data and analytics and space services, and they also take a look at Earth and oceans and atmosphere to help companies make data-driven decisions. So we'll kind of stay within that realm. We also want to figure out what's happening in D.C. You had a social media post from President Trump talking about his readout from the President Xi and President Trump's call. Maybe I didn't say that right. But anyway, he talked about the call that they had together. Tyler Kendall is joining us outside the White House. What did he say? What do we know?
Yeah, hey, Alex. Well, President Trump said that the call lasted a little over an hour and a half and said that it resulted in a, quote, positive conclusion for both countries. Importantly, he said that moving forward, he doesn't think there's going to be any questions around rare earth products. As you well know, the U.S. had been accusing China of slow walking these export licenses when it comes to critical and rare earth minerals that really are essential to U.S. supply chains, alleging that China had violated the terms reached when they had negotiated in Geneva. In fact, I actually caught up with the Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Falkender earlier this week, who told me that this was the issue that he thought would ultimately mean that these leaders were eventually going to have to get on the phone and talk about. President Trump also said that there would be another round of in-person talks like we saw in Geneva. He said that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and USTR Jamieson Greer would lead them, as well as Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. That would be a new addition to the team. He was not there at the talks in Geneva, but a pretty remarkable development to think about how our reporting has really indicated, Paul and Alex, that China would really much prefer for key advisors to iron out the issues before putting Xi Jinping on the phone call. And there were definitely some key issues that they needed to talk about today.
But as it relates to those rare earths, the U.S. president did not specify whether Beijing had agreed to speed export licenses, did he? Is that something that's just too complex at this point?
So we're still awaiting further details. We have to put into context that the Truth Social post was rather vague, but President Trump himself said that he doesn't think that there are going to be questions moving forward here. Of course, it's a very complex process and has been something that has been top of mind for the United States during these talks and really has become sort of a pressure point moving forward, since we know our analysts at Bloomberg Economics tell us that 30 out of 50 minerals that are deemed critical to the U.S. come primarily from China. So they really do have such a big market share when it comes to these critical minerals that the U.S. ends up relying on.
All right, very good. We appreciate that. We're just getting some more reporting there from Washington, D.C. as it relates to some of those talks, which I guess are inconclusive, but I guess it's just good news that
I think just the fact that they literally are talking.
Yes.
It's probably a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Tyler, thanks a lot. Tyler Kendall, Bloomberg Television, Washington correspondent, joining us on that call. Well, House Speaker Mike Johnson earlier joined Bloomberg to discuss key issues such as Elon Musk's vocal disagreement with the big, beautiful bill and the Speaker Johnson's fight to keep the $40,000 SALT cap and more. Bloomberg asked about the SALT cap that he's fighting to maintain. Here's part of that conversation.
I am crossing the Grand Canyon on a piece of dental floss, okay? The equilibrium that we reached here took quite a bit of time to get to where we are. And you can't...
It's hilarious. I love that.
That we negotiated carefully for over a year.
What is interesting
is
very
difficult for me.
Sometimes these senators or representatives, they say things that are so just funny, but gets to the heart of the matter so quickly. Like Kennedy also, Senator Kennedy, says things that are just like, it's so commonsensical that, but it's so funny too at the same time. All right, let's go to Gordon Chang on Fox News. Well, no, this is talking about, let's not do that because I don't want to strike on this channel. Let's not do that. It's really sad that because we're doing the live stream on YouTube, I got to be careful on what is said. Because I'll tell you, I've been nuked twice on YouTube. I lost, lost channels, and of course there's people that don't come back. But with that, please ask your social media to follow me because, Dr. Paul Cottrell gets strikes on YouTube. All right, let's go back to Bloomberg here while I find another video.
Collins and Senator Murkowski are essentially trying to push back some of what the House has already done. Now, we have two polarizing forces trying to push the bill in a different direction, sort of challenging for Senator John Thune here. So I think what happens is you will see these negotiations continue to play out over the next week, maybe the next week and a half or 2 weeks, and then you'll get a clear picture of where the Senate's going to go. But this bill does have to change in order to get enough senators to pass over and support it in approval.
Okay, so what does SALT really look like? What is it going to be 40,000? Is it going to be lower, or what we think?
So I think it's going to be either 40,000 or slightly lower than that, because I think what's going to happen here is, look, if I'm Representative Lawler, I really enjoyed that interview this morning with Speaker Johnson because he defended the cap and said, look, we negotiated this, it took a year. And the SALT caucus in the House does have a lot of power. They can say, look, we're just not going to vote for it. If you want to throw it back down to 10,000 Senate, feel free. I'm not going to vote for it, and it's not going to pass. But this idea of it's either going to be 40,000 or maybe slightly lower, because then the SALT caucus is in slightly a more difficult position because they did get something out of it. So for those of you in New York and New Jersey, I think you're going to get something. It's going to be around 40,000 or maybe just slightly under that.
Nathan, you mentioned Elon Musk. He has come out really harshly against this bill and on other topics. How much influence does he have now that he's no longer technically part of the Washington story?
So this is one of those things where it's starting to brew into an issue. I don't think it's an issue just yet. I mean, if you looked at Speaker Johnson's interview, he defended what they have been doing, and there's a lot of criticism on the congressional, the CBO at the moment in terms of that $2.4 trillion estimate of increasing the deficit. So if you ask the politicians up on Capitol Hill, I wouldn't say that there's really much there yet, but it could be coming because, like Elon Musk said on X yesterday, he's calling for individuals to call their senator and call their congressman and say, let's not support this. And there is a little bit of a group coming together. Senator Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson. That's enough votes that potentially could derail this bill. So if I'm Senator John Thune, I have to figure out how to get some of those individuals on board. And the answer is, well, maybe these tax cuts are permanent. Maybe they're just extended a certain amount of time. Or maybe this bill shrinks. Or maybe the debt ceiling goes from a $5 trillion increase to a $2 trillion increase. There's areas of flexibility here for leadership. And I think we're going to see that play out over the next few weeks. So we still think this bill is going to increase the deficit. But stay tuned because it may not be what the CBO just scored yesterday.
I think I asked you this before, but this is obviously what I'm interested in, and that's what happens to a lot of the energy tax credits, the ITC, from the IRA. And all the companies are kind of waiting on tenterhooks for what is going to happen. What's the indication that Republican senators are going to step up and try and fight for these tax credits?
So we've heard through the grapevine that, there are a lot of lobbyists up on Capitol Hill right now really pushing for this. And there are some receptive ears. Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina is one of those individuals who's really focused on this. Now, I think you're going to start seeing snippets of what the Senate is thinking towards the end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week in terms of those tax credits. And we're telling our clients that, look, the House tax credits were somewhat positive and then initially negative on the solar industry in particular. And I think you are going to see some moderate voices coming through when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be very difficult for some of these Republicans, say Senator Tom Tillis, for example, that will vote to gut the Inflation Reduction Act when the Inflation Reduction Act is bringing jobs and plants and other types of economic growth to their states. So I do think you're going to see a moderation of what the House did. And I think we'll see some of those details coming out early next week.
Got a red headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. NATO adopts military buildup plans as part of new spending goals. We'll have some more reporting on that. So some movement there across the pond. Nathan, President Trump quite successfully kind of worked the phones in the House to get passage of the deal. It's a little bit different in the Senate where, you know, these folks have 6-year terms here. What's the expectation of what kind of influence President Trump can play in this negotiation in the Senate?
Well, you hit it right on the head. I mean, obviously with the House of Representatives, they run every 2 years. And so the idea of a primary threat is much more serious to them. You know, but when it comes to the Senate, I will say is that their primary goal is to make sure that the tax extensions, or sorry, the tax increases don't happen by the end of the year. Senators know they have to pass something. The question on the Senate side is that what else are we going to do with this? So I think that President Trump will have to take a different type of approach in working with the Senate. One of those things like, look, this is America First policy. And even though only 1/3 of the Senate will be running approximately next year, the Republicans do want to remain control of both the House and the Senate, and failure to adopt something like that could put that at risk. So I do think President Trump will have a little bit more hands-on approach with the Senate. Obviously, he's going to have to manage both those who want to see the deficit decreased, along with the moderates who want to see how these pay-fors decreased. And I think they will be able to come up with a solution. It's just going to take a lot more work, and he's going to have to roll up his sleeves to do it.
All right, Nathan, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Nathan Dean joins us from Bloomberg Intelligence. He covers all of policy there for Bloomberg Intelligence as senior policy analyst.
When we were down in D.C., I did have a little free time. You were working.
I was working.
We went to Lincoln Memorial and the Vietnam Memorial, all the cool stuff. I had no even thought of coming. I'm going to go to Capitol Hill and see my representatives.
Oh, God, no.
So I got much more inspiration
Absolutely
from going to
not.
the Lincoln Memorial. Well, you go to Lincoln Memorial, you read the Gettysburg Address, and then you read his speech for the second inauguration. It just takes your breath away.
It really does.
You know, it's just amazing.
You get that feeling in your stomach in like a good way. Yeah, I totally remember that as well. All right, coming up, we're going to break down the markets with Ann Maletti, head of equity investments. And
please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the stack here that's going to help with your bone density and your cardiovascular system. So vitamin D3 is a gene expression cofactor, very important. It also helps to absorb calcium. Vitamin D3 has a higher efficacy when you take magnesium in your diet or through supplementation. You can get magnesium on my store through the vitamin C magnesium, the magnesium and zinc supplement, or the Boomer Boost. But taking vitamin D3 will also help to get cells to go into apoptosis if they need to go into apoptosis. By taking vitamin D3, you're absorbing that calcium, and by doing resistance training, you'll be able to build more bone density, especially when you're taking in calcium. I drink milk, but some people take calcium supplements. Now, vitamin K2, MK7, stacked with D3 will help you to absorb that calcium even more. Now, when you're doing that resistance training, that's going to help to build up that bone density. Super important to prevent osteopenia or osteoarthritis or osteoporosis. Now, there is a protocol that I should do a video on where you can reduce osteoarthritis. I used to have osteoarthritis from doing triathlons in my 20s and 30s, and I reversed it. And I'll do a video again. I've done it a long time ago, but I'll revisit that conversation, and I'll tell you what I did to reduce arthritis. So taking D3 and K2, what it'll do, it'll help to pull some of that calcium around plaque formation and reduce further plaque formation with the calcium depositing around the plaque formation. So it's going to reduce further formation of calcium depositing, but also help to slowly pull out what's already there. And there's a whole protocol that I'll even talk about later where you can actually reduce plaque formation. Can't get it all out, but you can go from, let's say, 50 to 10, say 50% blockage to 10% blockage, or 60% blockage to 15% blockage. Takes time, but it can be done. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin K2 and the D3. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. and you're helping support the work I do. All of this is for free. All these videos for free. So please help support the work by getting the products and donating on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. All right. Let's
is some themes, some broad stuff that you're telling your customers?
So I think there's a lot of interest in defense and intelligence applications of satellites, and in particular, the type of RF type of technology that we have. Naturally, this comes out of the current geopolitical situation. You have a lot of stuff going on in the United States right now. And at the same time, really since February, you've had rest of world governments looking at increasing their defense budgets, having less expectation of reliance on the United States to defend them in terms of crisis. So there's a lot of interest in how the rest of world can develop their capabilities.
Do you have customers around the world, or is it domestic U.S.?
We do. We have customers around the world.
Is the U.S. government a customer?
The U.S. government is also a customer.
Are they the big one, the lion's share, or are you guys pretty diversified?
We're actually quite diversified, both between commercial company customers as well as a government, and that can be civil agencies who buy our weather atmospheric data sets, and it can also be defense and intelligence, and that's U.S. and rest of world. So it's pretty well diversified.
Well, we've had companies ranging from McDonald's to, I don't know what, say AI is revolutionizing their business. How is AI impacting the satellite business?
So AI is also an important term and topic in the satellite sector. There's a couple of areas where we find it interesting. The first is in weather forecasting, where we're doing AI-based weather forecasting, specifically when we talk about sub-seasonal forecasts, so going 30, 45 days in the future, where normal forecasting models aren't usually very good. The other areas, or when it comes to satellites, are the processing of data and the ability to use AI to process them automatically and on orbit, so you don't have to download all the data sets, as well as in the operations of the constellation overall, because if you have many, many satellites in orbit in various orbital planes with lots of different sensors on them, having AI ability to manage that network is something quite interesting.
Sorry. I was going to say, you also had a contract with Space Force, right? Did I read that right?
Yeah, there is one that was just recently announced.
Space Force contract. How cool is that?
I know.
So how easy is it to come to deals with contracts? I would think that your services are highly needed right now as companies are trying to figure out where to build stuff, for example, or how to allocate their supply chains.
So I think demand is very strong right now for both satellite data sets as it relates to climate or to better understanding increased weather variability. And there is also increasing demand, what I mentioned, on the defense and then intelligence side, and in particular, as more and more countries look to how they build out their own sovereign capabilities. Yep. And this is where we have the strength in building, both in Europe as well as in the United States.
Teresa, thank you for coming in. Really appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. Teresa Condor, CEO of Spire Global. It is a publicly traded company, SPIR. We appreciate Teresa coming into our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Looking at the markets here, we got the S&P up 25 points, the Dow up 133, NASDAQ up 136. That's 0.7%. We're starting to build a little momentum in the markets. 10-year Treasury yields up a little bit as well, 4.38%. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
All right, let's listen to I think it's a podcast that Bloomberg did 2 hours ago, talking about can Canada emerge as an energy superpower?
Your company's workflow.
The Canadian government has big ambitions to make this country a global energy superpower. It was one of the key themes highlighted in a meeting this week between Prime Minister Mark Carney and the country's premiers. But what's it actually going to take to get us to that point? And does this initiative create potential investment opportunities? Joining us to break it all down is Hussein Aladina. He is Managing Director and Head of Commodities at TD Asset Management. How are you?
I'm great, excited.
Two parts I want to talk about, I think more is Canada and the global energy superpower, and then just the idea of how much energy is going to be needed as we move ahead. So these are the my two questions over the next little while. At a high level, what does it mean for Canada to become, assuming it's not, a global energy superpower? What does it take? What's in the way?
So we're the fourth largest crude producer globally, so I'd say we are a superpower. But I think that we've likely been punching below our weight, right? We've been blessed, not just in energy, but from a commodity perspective, we've been endowed with a tremendous amount of resource. And I think we've neglected the development of that resource for different reasons over the course of the last decade. I think Prime Minister Carney's refreshing take on it is welcome. We're going to need, I think we're going to need the energy, we're going to need the commodities. So I think there will be a market for it. But it does take time, and we've talked about this before, like the reason a commodity cycle exists is because it takes time for supply to respond. So even with the best of intentions, which I think the Prime Minister has and the Energy Minister now has, it takes time to build out.
Can we just elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think it's interesting for people to know, because we hear, I know TD Economics came out, this wasn't pipelines, but they said I think it was 18 years to bring a mine online in Canada. But when you were out chatting earlier, saying even if we had all the approvals, everything we needed to get done and just started, takes 2 to 3 years to build a pipeline.
So let's just take an example of TMX, which came on last year. That project took 11 years from sort of idea to the first sort of commercial use. Northern Gateway took 14 years, 12 years before it was canceled. Right. So there is a process that we have to move through. And I imagine that the federal and provincial government, if there is appetite, can expedite that. But there are physical challenges, physical constraints associated with laying pipe or building upstream, downstream production. And that stuff takes time. 2 to 3 years is probably very optimistic. 11 years might be on the long end of things, but can we get pipelines and infrastructure built in 5 to 7 years? I think so, if there is appetite to do that.
How does that, as someone who watches commodity prices, how does that affect how you look at things? I mean, it's material. I assume at some level later on. But how are you thinking about it?
So I'm excited about it as a Canadian because I think it's phenomenal for Canada's potential GDP, what it means for the dollar, what it means for GDP per capita. It doesn't make me any less bearish commodities near term because it takes so long to bring this production to market if things go well. Generally speaking, I'd say, and I'm sure we'll talk about the oil market later, but like the focus of market participants, broadly speaking, is the next 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months. Are there folks trading oil 5 years forward? Yes, but not meaningfully. And again, I think even 5 years forward is probably the earliest where we see kind of the supply demand impact of policy changes which are happening today.
Is it, and so when you are building pipelines and making the plans in terms of, what the paybacks are and revenues, you have to look at oil prices 5 years out, not 6 months out, to your point, and you see transitions happening with, LNG, nuclear. I think Meta just signed a deal with a 20-year deal. So how do you, what do you longer term see for the demand for oil?
So I think there's two things there. So on the long term, the demand for oil is going to be highly, highly correlated and a function of GDP growth first and foremost, and then your alternatives. Today, whether we like it or not, oil is still one of the cheapest forms of energy. It's the most available, it's secure, it's easy to move. And I don't see demand, we've talked about this for years, I don't see demand for oil peaking the way that some have argued will happen before 2030. I think oil demand continues to grow if the economy continues to move. On the price level that is discounted when you're thinking about the DCF of a company or the economics of a pipeline, oftentimes the forward curve will be used. So we'll look at the forward curve and use that as kind of the expected price.
Yeah.
But the forward curve is not a predictor of future price.
Mhm.
So we use it, or analysts will use it. But ultimately, if you take the forward curve, or if you look at the forward curve, you have this sort of misguided idea that oil prices are decreasing in the future. The weakness in forward prices will discourage investment, all else equal, which makes it all the harder.
And what about if I just say power? If I kind of bring, oil is one way of powering the economy, but the demand for power overall for the next little while is you just see up and to the right is how or is it?
Yeah, no, I think it is. So globally, demand for power will grow with GDP. So as an economy industrializes, their power demand increases.
But AI and...
But if you look in the developed market, so in the US, for example, power demand for the better part of 20 years was flat to down because we were exporting our manufacturing, our power demand elsewhere. Today, if we look at power demand in the US over the course of the last 12, 16 months, for the first time, it's been increasing. It's been increasing because, as you said, ChatGPT or AI-related demand, as well as energy transition on the margin, you're seeing substitution out of ICE vehicles into EV vehicles. I think the outlook for power is quite constructive globally and locally because of the growth in the economy together with this, what seems like insatiable demand from AI.
Bring it back to Canada. LNG, of course, is something that that we're focused on here as well too. And I think the first exports from Kitimat are getting closer.
Yeah.
But Canada are we not like a later player on the LNG stage?
Yeah. So globally, like your largest LNG suppliers are the US and Qatar, and it does take time to build liquefaction capacity. And we're definitely behind the ball. But again, if we look at the world and we anticipate that GDP is going to continue to increase, power demand is going to continue to increase. A lot of that power today is met with coal. Part of the reason that power is met with coal is because China, India, et cetera, have coal, and security of supply has become an issue in the last couple of years.
Growing your business shouldn't mean growing your overhead. Growth should be seamless with AI-driven workflows built.
I think that Canada should develop and continue to develop their LNG. We should try to do it quicker than we have been doing it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we're going to need to grow power supply. Nuclear will fill part of that gap, but you're talking about a 10-year window where you're not going to have meaningful nuclear additions. Natural gas can fill that void. And even post, when we have that nuclear running potentially, you're still going to need gas.
Yeah.
If you're a China or an India, today you're importing from Qatar. It's a relatively long route, or you're importing from the US. It's not clear that the US is always going to be there to export to you. So Canada can play a role in diversifying the supply chain for Asia.
Yeah.
And geographically, we happen to be well situated.
I want to bring it back more into current times. And, we have some horrible fires that are taking place actually right across the country, but specifically we're seeing a lot in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And we're seeing a shutdown of a lot of production, oil production. Is that material to the oil market?
So horrible situation.
Yeah.
Right now, there's about 300 to 400,000 barrels a day of oil shut in. That's largely, I believe, Cenovus, MEG, and the Christina Lake project, I believe. Those are not trivial volumes, right? Yeah. So the market, maybe to contrast, the market was quite concerned about the incremental barrels that OPEC was adding to the market.
Right.
They added 414,000 barrels a day, just for some perspective, in May, June, and July. If we lose this 400,000 barrels a day for a period of time, that offsets that. The quality of the oil is also very important.
Right.
So Canada produces a medium heavy barrel. A lot of the production growth that we've seen globally of late, which has come out of the US shale, has been a light sweet barrel. You need those medium barrels to mix with the light barrels to put into the refinery to make the gasoline and diesel that we consume. Before I came down, actually, it looks like there's some rain in the forecast, which is going to provide some reprieve and might lend to some production returning to market. Hopefully that production doesn't stay offline for a meaningful amount of time, but barrels lost are barrels lost.
Yeah. What is your short-term look on oil right now? Let's just say the next, 3 months, 6 months, given OPEC and what's happening elsewhere.
So it's been hard, and we've talked before about kind of this disconnect in sort of supply demand fundamentals, inventories, and price.
Yeah.
For the better part, I would say, Kim, for the last 16 months, the market has been anticipating, consensus has been anticipating these meaningful builds in inventories, and that's got the market despite the robust near-term fundamentals, has got the market relatively bearish. We haven't seen those builds. If we look at the first half of this year, inventories have built, but not meaningfully more than normal, and definitely not as much as the market expected. On paper, when we look at balances through the end of the year, we're supposed to see sizable builds by the end of the year. In the fourth quarter, we might see 2 million barrels a day of builds, which would be meaningful. My caveat is that we've been expecting these builds for a very long time, and they haven't materialized.
And if the build's not materialized because of the supply has been lower, the demand, which side?
So a couple of weeks ago, the IEA came out, not to get too technical, but in the oil balance, you have your supply, your demand, and that should equal the change in inventory.
Right.
There's a line item on the balance that's called miscellaneous to balance, which is the plug.
Always bad things come from miscellaneous to balance everywhere.
So they came back out 2 weeks ago. They came out and they said, by the way, demand in 2022, 2023, 2024 was higher than we thought. So they put it into demand. I think we have to be very mindful that we're talking about a market, Kim, that's 105 million barrels a day. And when we talk about the margin, right, the surplus or the deficit, we're talking about 500,000 barrels a day, 1 million barrels a day. So we're applying a lot of precision, but in reality, it's 105 million barrel per day market. And we don't have complete transparency on inventories globally.
Right.
Today at $65 a barrel, I'm less bullish than I was 2 weeks ago in the 50s. I think on paper, there is more upside risk in the near term because of geopolitics and the potential supply disruptions that stem from that. But I'm definitely concerned that, you know, growth slows and what that means ultimately for balances later this year. I'm not in the $40, $50 camp, but I'm also not in the 80, 90 camp unless we have some sort of supply related disruption.
What are you watching when you, when you're watching, when you talk about it, there's a lot of things to pull on there. So from a geopolitical standpoint, what's going to move markets? And then also from a demand standpoint, because as we all kind of just wait and see what does trade look like really when deals happen, don't happen, whatever, everything. We're all tired of it. But.
So on geopolitics, I would say that 2 months ago, consensus was very much, hey, Trump is going to forge a deal between Russia, Ukraine, and there's going to be something positive that happens with Iran in the Middle East. Both of those things look far less likely today.
Ukraine's special forces has a lot to do with what happened lately.
And Iran has been very clear that, you know, the red line for them is that we're going to continue to enrich. The red line for the U.S. is that, no, you're not. So I'm not sure how that plays out. And I imagine there's some political gamesmanship taking place, but the likelihood that Iranian barrels are going to return in mass to the market, as some people are expecting, I think is lower probability than maybe what some folks thought a couple months ago. So there's a lot of production at risk. We haven't talked about Libya, which is also having issues right now, in addition to the challenges in Canada with the wildfires. A lot of supply at risk and very tight balances. Now, I don't know how bearish I can get on this idea that, hey, demand is going to fall apart later this year and I'm going to get phenomenal supply growth. The weakness in price that we've seen over the course of the last several weeks has already led to a reduction in the number of rigs drilling for oil in the Permian Basin. If you look at frac crews, the number of folks that are out there working, that number has fallen off meaningfully as well. So I think we have to remember that the market has, I think, a tendency of maybe being more bearish on demand than we should be. And we definitely are, at least over the course of the last 10 years, have been far more optimistic on the supply outlook than what's been realized. So I kind of keep that in the back of my mind when I'm looking at the market. The here and now, crude is backwardated, right?
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Jake from State Farm, everybody.
Ask your provider for Cologuard.
So refiners are paying a premium. I'm paying $1 premium to have crude in July versus waiting till August.
Right.
That's meaningful. And refinery margins, right? What the refiner gets paid to refine that crude that they're paying premium for today are sitting at 14, 15-month highs. So there's no indication on the refinery side that there is this capitulation in demand that we're worried about. That's what we're looking at today.
Fascinating. Give me 20 seconds on gold.
All right. Before we go to Trump's Oval Office question and answer session here with the German Chancellor, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This is a dual purpose product. This is going to help boost up that immune system, and it also helps with your cardiovascular system. Olive leaf extract brings down inflammation, and it also helps to improve your lipid profile. Helps to bring down LDL, and helps to increase HDL. If you have less LDL, then you have less plaque formation, because less LDL means less oxidized LDL. And oxidized LDL is the starting point to actually building up plaque. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. It stacks really well with the omega-3. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. It stacks well also with turmeric and ashwagandha.
But no, I think we have everything. I think we're in very good shape with China and the trade deal. We have a deal with China, as you know, but we were straightening out some of the points, having to do mostly with rare earth, magnets, and some other things.
So those reduced trade tariff rates, they remain in effect?
Yeah, we have the deal. I mean, we've had a deal. We announced the deal, and we'll be, I guess you could say, I wouldn't even say finalizing it up, Scott. I would say we have a deal, and we're going to just make sure that everybody understands what the deal is. Okay. We had a really good conversation. By the way, he invited me to China, and I invited him here. We both accepted. So I'll be going there with the First Lady at a certain point, and he'll be coming here hopefully with the First Lady of China.
What do you expect from Germany? Did you talk about the Chinese students? Are you allowing them to come to the US?
No, Chinese students are coming. No problem. No problem.
Okay,
It's our honor to have them, frankly. Look, we want to have foreign students, but we want them to be checked. You know, in the case of Harvard and Columbia and others, all we want to do is see their list. There's no problem with that. This is anybody outside of our country, international students. Because when we see some of the people that we've been watching, we say, where do these people come from? How is that possible? No, we want to have foreign students come. We're very honored by it, but we want to see their list. Harvard didn't want to give us the list. They're going to be giving us the list now. I think they're starting to behave, actually, if you want to know the truth.
Okay.
On Russia, are you willing to put more pressure on Putin to end the war by imposing new sanctions on Russia and also on China?
Well, remember, I'm the one that ended Nord Stream 2, going to a place called Germany, come to think of it. I'm sorry I did that. I don't know. But I ended Nord Stream 2. Nobody else did. And then when Biden came in, he immediately approved it. That's the largest, essentially the largest pipeline in the world, going to Germany and other countries. And by the way, we have so much oil and gas, you will not be able to buy it all. I mean, you literally, we have so much, and I hope we're going to make that a part of our trade deal because we have more than anybody else. We have actually the most by far in the world, probably double what anyone else has. So we'll work on that. I'm sure that's something we'll discuss today.
Mr. President, what do you expect from Germany and what do you expect from the Chancellor?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to meet because I've been dealing with the Chancellor and he's very, a very good man to deal with. He's difficult, I would say. Can I say that? It's a positive. Go ahead. You wouldn't want me to say you're easy, right? No. Yeah, he's a very great representative of Germany. I think all we want is just going to have a good relationship. The rest will just sort of follow very easily. We'll have a good trade deal. I mean, I guess that will be mostly determined by the European Union, but you're a very big part of that, so you'll be involved. But we'll end up hopefully with a trade deal or we'll do something, you know, we'll do the tariffs. I mean, I'm okay with the tariffs or we make a deal with the trade, and I guess that's what we're discussing now.
Mr. President.
Mr. President? Okay.
Is Germany doing enough on defense, Mr. President? Is Germany doing enough on defense?
What?
Defense spending.
Is Germany doing enough on defense?
The Chancellor wants to.
Is Germany doing enough on
Chancellor wants to
defense?
spend 3.5.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't discussed it very much. I know that you're spending more money on defense now and quite a bit more money. And that's a positive thing. I'm not sure that General MacArthur would have said it's positive, you know. He wouldn't like it, but I sort of think it's good. You understand what I mean by that?
I understand.
He made a statement, never let Germany rearm. And I said, I always think about that when he says, sir, we're spending more money on defense. I say, ooh, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. But, you know, at least to a certain point. there'll be a point when I'll say, please don't arm anymore if you don't mind. We'll be watching him. I'll get it.
Mr. President.
Biden, Mr. President.
Yeah, Biden, you said Biden.
Your predecessor dismissed your auto pen investigation. He said he made all the decisions during his presidency. I'm curious your reaction to his dismissal.
Well, look, the auto pen, I think, is the big scandal outside of the rigged election of 2020. I think the biggest scandal of the last many years is the auto pen. And who's using it? I happen to think I know, okay, because I'm here. And I'm not a big auto pen person, fortunately. I'm glad. I'm very glad. It's an easy way out. But it's a very bad thing, very dangerous. You know, I sign important documents. Usually when they put documents in front of you, they're important. Even if you're signing ambassadorships and I consider that important. I think it's inappropriate. You have somebody that's devoting 4 years of their life or more to being an ambassador. I think you really that person deserves to get a real signature, not an auto pen signature. And I can tell auto pen easily. I can look at it like two little pinholes from pulling the paper, right? You always see the pinholes. Yeah. It's real easy to tell about auto pen. I think it's very disrespectful to people when they get an auto pen signature. Outside, auto pen to me are used when thousands of letters come in from young people all over the country and you want to get them back. And, you know, people use auto pens for that, to send a little signature at the bottom of a letter. We have thousands of them. We get thousands of letters a week. And it's not possible to, do. I'd like to do it myself, but you can't do it. To me, that's where auto pens start and stop. But I'm sure that he didn't know many of the things. Look, he was never for open borders. He was never for transgender for everybody. He was never for men playing in women's sports. I mean, he changed. I mean, all of these things that changed so radically. I don't think he had any idea that frankly, I said it during the debate and I say it now. He didn't have much of an idea what was going on.
Mr. President.
He shouldn't be. I mean, essentially, whoever used the auto pen was the president. And that is wrong. It's illegal. It's so bad. And it's so disrespectful to our country.
Mr. President. Mr. President, will you lead your troops in Germany? And if I may ask a question to the Chancellor to answer in German for the German audience. How has your first encounter been?
The answer is yes. We'll talk about that. But if they'd like to have them there, we have a lot of them, about 45,000. It's a lot of troops. It's a city when you think of it. That's good economic development. They're highly paid troops, and they spend a lot of money in Germany. But the relationship with Germany is very important. Yeah, we'll be doing that. No problem.
May I say a few words in German to the German public? So, danke für die Frage. Wir sind hier im Weißen Haus und ich bedanke mich beim Präsidenten für den sehr freundlichen Empfang im Oval Office in diesem weltweit bekannten Raum. Ich freue mich sehr, hier zu sein und wir bereiten eine Vertiefung unserer Zusammenarbeit vor.
This is live sound coming from the Oval Office on Bloomberg Radio. The Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, meeting with President Trump today at the White House with a series of events, including lunch, a working lunch, and a bilateral meeting here in the Oval. Let's listen live on Bloomberg.
I understand almost everything and to speak as good as I can.
Very good. You know, it's
Mr. President, you've made
an achievement, actually.
Mr. President, can I follow up on that?
Thank you, Mr. President. The criticism that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, regarding Elon Musk and your big, beautiful bill. What's your reaction to that? Do you think it in any way hurts passage in the Senate, which is, of course, what is you're seeking?
Well, look, I've always liked Elon, and it's always very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible. It's the biggest cut in the history of our country. We've never cut. It's about 1.6 trillion in cuts. It's the biggest tax cut. You would say, people's taxes will go way down, but it's the biggest tax cut in history. It's we are doing things in that bill that are unbelievable. And when you look at what we're doing for small businesses, for people, for middle-income people, all of the things that we're doing, nobody's ever seen anything like it. And Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate, and which was a lot of money for electric vehicles, and they're having a hard time with the electric vehicles, and they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidy. And Elon knew this from the beginning. He knew it for a long time ago. That's been in there. That's been, I would say, JD, that hasn't changed. That's been right from the beginning, Mr. Secretary, that hasn't changed at all, right from the beginning. But I know that disturbed him. He wanted, and rightfully, he recommended somebody from that he, I guess, knew very well. I'm sure he respected him, but to run NASA. And I didn't think it was appropriate. And he happened to be a Democrat, like totally Democrat. And I say, look, we won. We get certain privileges. And one of the privileges, we don't have to appoint a Democrat. NASA is very important. We have great people. General Kane is going to be picking somebody with our, we'll be checking him out, seeing, but he wanted that person, a certain person, and we said no. And, I can understand why he's upset. Remember, he was here for a long time. You saw a man who was very happy when he stood behind the Oval desk. And even with the black eye, I said, do you want a little makeup? We'll get you a little makeup. But he said, no, I don't think so, which is interesting and very nice. He wants to be who he is. So you could make that statement too, I guess. Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised because you were here. Everybody in this room practically was here as we had a wonderful send-off. He said wonderful things about me. You couldn't have nicer, said the best thing. He's worn the hat. Trump was right about everything. And I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill. We call it a great, big, beautiful bill because that's what it is. And again, biggest tax cuts in history, biggest economic development moves anywhere. We've never done anything like it. Business is spurred. And I don't know if you've seen the numbers, but the numbers came out. Even the CBO, which is run by Democrats, said that we're going to be doing, I'd like you to discuss it, the 2.8 trillion, that CBO. This is a group of people that are Democrats. They're very hostile to us. They just came out with phenomenal numbers, what it does. You want to mention that, Scott?
Yes, sir. So what we've seen is we keep hearing from the CBO that there's going to be a large deficit from the bill, which we disagree with, but using the CBO scoring, they came out and scored the tariff revenue. We think it'll be the minimum of 2.8 trillion over the 10-year window, which actually puts the bill in surplus if you include the tariff revenue, which they won't do.
It gives you a tremendous surplus, but we're not allowed to use that. For some reason, they say scoring. Nobody knows what scoring means. Maybe a couple of people, but nobody. Somebody sits in the background. They say, well, we're not going to allow that. They're not allowing other things that we have that are tremendously profitable for our country. But if you saw the other day, CNBC, they came out with numbers, and the people on the show, very good people, I've watched them for a long time, they couldn't believe the numbers, how good they are. The numbers were incredible. And that was personal income and also very low inflation. We have very low inflation. We're down to 2% now, and maybe even lower than that. And when I took it over, it was a mess. Remember, we had the worst inflation probably in the history of our country. They say 48 years, but let's say I think it's worse than that. So we had the worst inflation in the history of our country under the Biden administration. Now we're down to a beautiful number, 2%. You'd actually like to keep it there. Better than zero is 2%. It's going down maybe to 1%, and 1% is like perfect. That's perfect. You don't want to have zero for certain reasons that nobody is very interested to listen to. But we have almost perfect inflation. Grocery prices are down. Everything. Remember eggs? We weren't going to buy another egg for the next 20 years. It was so expensive, right? Remember? You guys all hit me about eggs. Eggs have come down 400%. Everybody has eggs now. They're having eggs for breakfast again. But if you look at gasoline, very important. I think always the most important because it's the energy is the biggest factor. That's what happened. He screwed up our energy policy, and everything went up because energy went up. But now energy is way down, and they have states where you're at $1.98 a gallon for gasoline. So the costs have come way down, and one of the things I ran on was that. I ran on the border. We have the best border in the history of our country, 99.99%. It was last week, 3 people came in, 2 of them for medical reasons. We let them in because one of them had a heart attack. I think it was a nice thing to do, and one of them had something else. So we've never I had very good numbers for 4 years, but we really topped it. And I want to thank Christie and Tom Holman. They've done a fantastic job, but nobody mentions that anymore. Remember, a few months ago, the border was a total disaster. People were coming in by the hundreds of thousands of people a day, a week, a month. I mean, we had a month, 2 million people came in 1 month. The border was being overrun, and a lot of bad people, criminals, murderers, drug dealers. We had some of the worst people in the world coming in from all over the world. It's totally closed. And you know what? People are coming into our country, but they're coming in legally. So we've done a great job. Elon knew that. Elon endorsed me very strongly. He actually went up in campaign for me. I think I would have won. Susie would say I would have won Pennsylvania easily anyway, even if the governor ran, the real governor, not the governor from Minnesota, he's a sick puppy, that guy. That poor guy, I feel sorry for him. But they made a bad choice with him. But if you pick Shapiro or anybody else, I spoke to him recently about his house being set on fire, which was terrible. But if they picked him, I would have won Pennsylvania. I won it by a lot. But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem. And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars. And it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have a gasoline, combustion. We want to have different. We want to have hybrids. We want to have we want to be able to sell everything. And when that was cut, and Congress wanted to cut it, it became a little bit different. And I can understand that. But he knew every aspect of this bill. He knew it better than almost anybody. And he never had a problem until right after he left. And if you saw the statements he made about me, which I'm sure you can get very easily, it's very fresh on tape. He said the most beautiful things about me. And he hasn't said bad about me personally, but I'm sure that'll be next. But I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
Mr. President, I just want to clarify, did he raise any of these concerns with you privately before he raised them publicly? And this is the guy you put in charge of cutting spending. Should people not take him seriously about spending now? Are you saying this is all sour grapes?
No, he worked hard and he did a good job. And I'll be honest, I think he misses the place. I think he got out there and all of a sudden he wasn't in this beautiful Oval Office, and he's got nice offices too. But there's something about this one. I was telling the Chancellor, this is where it is. People come in here, even from Germany. They come in and they walk into the Oval Office, and it's just a special place. It's, World War I, it started and it ended here, and World War II, and so many other things. Everything big comes right from this beautiful space. It's now much more beautiful than it was 6 months ago. A lot of good things are happening in this room. And I'll tell you, he's not the first. People leave my administration and they love us. And then at some point they miss it so badly. And some of them embrace it and some of them actually become hostile. I don't know what it is. It's sort of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess they call it. But we have it with others too. They leave and they wake up in the morning and the glamour's gone. The whole world is different and they become hostile. I don't know what it is. Someday you'll write a book about it and you'll let us know. Yeah.
Mr. President, speaking of ending wars in this room, you were very critical of Vladimir Putin a couple of days ago. What kind of play is he playing from your perspective? What is it?
Well, look, he got hit. He's been doing hitting, so I understand it. But he got hit hard. And I don't think he's playing games. I think I've always said he wanted the whole thing. I thought he wanted the entire, everything having to do with Ukraine. That's something that would have never happened if I were president. The election was rigged. I didn't get to be president, but I got to be president now. And I think it's a much more important presidency. Other than a couple of things like that, the war would have never happened. The war with Ukraine, with Putin, would have never happened, ever, not even a chance. And it didn't happen for 4 years. And it wasn't thought of. I used to talk to him about Ukraine a lot. It was the apple of his eye, but he would have never done what he did. And I think mistakes were made by him, but I think mistakes were made by other people. The president should have never allowed that war. Biden should have never allowed that war to happen. If you had the right guy in here, that war would have never happened. Israel would have never happened with Hamas. That would have never happened. The attack on Israel would have never happened because Iran was broke. They had no money. They had no money to give to Hamas or Hezbollah or anybody else. And all of that would have never happened. Inflation wouldn't have happened. It was caused mostly by energy. And the Biden administration messed up my great energy policy. We were down into the 190 a gallon, and it would have never happened. It was caused by energy and their bad spending on the Green New Scam and other things that they spent on. But all of those things would have never happened. But maybe most importantly, the war, Chancellor, with Russia would never have happened with Ukraine. It was something that would have, you know, I dealt with Putin a lot. There was no chance, zero. And, you know, a lot of people say, how do you know? For 4 years, it didn't happen. There was never a chance of it happening. And he understood the consequences. Now, it's a shame. I mean, when you see all of those people, they came out with a report today that millions of people have died, much more than people thought. And I've been saying that for a long time. The amount of death in that war is far greater than the news has been reporting, or than, frankly, that either side has been reporting. It's a very sad thing. And I can tell you, just speaking for the Chancellor, because we speak about it, he feels the same way. He wants to see it ended. Would you like to say something?
Absolutely. And I'm here, Mr. President, to talk with you later on how we could contribute to that goal. And we all are looking for measures and for instruments to bring this terrible war to an end. And may I remind you that we are having June 6th tomorrow. This is D-Day anniversary, when the Americans once ended a war in Europe. And I think this is in your hand in specific, in ours.
That was not a pleasant day for you?
No, that was not a pleasant.
This was not a great
in the
day.
long run, Mr. President, this was the liberation of my country from Nazi dictatorship.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
and we know what we owe you. But this is the reason why I'm saying that America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. So let's talk about what we can do jointly, and we are ready to do what we can. And you know that we gave support to Ukraine, and that we are looking for more pressure on Russia. The European Union did, and we should talk about that.
We will talk about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's good timing. The numbers for our country are through the roof. The economic.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. The Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It's going to target your heart and your vascular system. It's going to help with your brain function and boost up your metabolism and your energy levels. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Boomer Boost. Take it every day. It's going to help you to lose weight. It's going to help you to have a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day. You'll be able to concentrate better. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll notice the effects of this within 72 hours. It's a great way to get healthy and to control your A1C levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Omega-3 will help with cardiovascular health. It helps to prevent red blood cells from overclotting. And omega-3 helps to control your lipid profile. It'll help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. Omega-3 is very important to take, especially if you're age 40 or older. It's important. And stack it with turmeric and ashwagandha. And that's a very powerful stack for cardiovascular health. But also, turmeric and ashwagandha helps with your boosting up that immune system because it's bringing down inflammation. So turmeric soaks up free radicals, brings down pro-inflammatory cytokines. Very important. And ashwagandha root will help to control cortisol levels and help to control your blood glucose level. So please go to my store, stack it together. This is a very powerful stack, the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the omega-3. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And if you want to supercharge it, also stack it with the olive leaf extract.
And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know, it takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough. That's a bloodbath that's going on over there. And when I see the moment where I say, well, they're going to just keep fighting. You know, I gave the analogy yesterday when I spoke to President Putin. I had a 2-hour and 15-minute call with him. Sometimes, and this is me speaking maybe in a negative sense, but sometimes you see two young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart. And I gave that analogy to Putin yesterday. I said, President, maybe you're going to have to keep fighting and suffering a lot because both sides are suffering before you pull them apart, before they're able to be pulled apart. But it's a pretty known analogy. You have two kids, they fight. Sometimes you let them fight for a little while. You see it in hockey. You see it in sports. The referees let them go for a couple of seconds. Let them go for a little while before you pull them apart. And maybe, and I said it, and maybe that's a negative because we're saying go, but a lot of bad blood. There's some bad blood between the two. I have to deal with it, and the chancellor has to deal with it. It's incredible. The level of, there's a great hatred between those two men, but between the warring parties, great hatred.
Also, you say and believe apparently that there's no immediate peace.
What?
That there's no immediate peace. There will be no.
Well, I can't. I'd love to have immediate if I could. But we don't have immediate. You know, it's like I'd love to have that. I'd like it to start. Right now, we would leave a room if we knew the war could end. We'd say, forget about you guys. Forget about trade. Right?
Yeah.
We'd say, let's go settle it. There's some additional fighting that's going to go on. You know, he attacked and they attacked pretty harshly. They went deep into Russia. And he actually told me, I mean, I made it very clear. He said, we have no choice but to attack based on that. And it's probably not going to be pretty. I don't like it. I said, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. You should stop it. But again, there's a lot of hatred. And, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that with India and Pakistan, I was able to stop that. And those are nuclear powers. And that was getting close to being out of hand. And I spoke to some very talented people on both sides, very good people on both sides. And I said, you know, we're dealing with you on trade, Pakistan and India right now. I said, we're not going to deal with you on trade if you're going to go shooting each other and whipping out nuclear weapons that maybe even affect us. Because, you know, that nuclear dust blows across oceans very quickly. It affects us. And I said, if you're going to do that, we're not going to do any trade deals. And you know what? I got that war stopped. Now, I hope we don't go back and we find out that they started, but I don't think they will. They were both good. They were well represented. I want to congratulate both countries because, as you know, the leader of India, who's a great guy, was here a few weeks ago. We had some great talks. We're doing a trade deal. And Pakistan, likewise, they have very strong leadership. Some people won't like when I say that, but, you know, it is what it is. And they stopped that war. Now, am I going to get credit? I'll never get credit for anything. They don't give me credit for anything, but nobody else could have done it. I stopped it. I was very proud of that. I wish we could do the same thing with Ukraine and Russia. And at some point it'll happen. I believe that. And if it doesn't happen, or if I see somebody's out of line, if Russia's out of line, you'll be amazed how tough. Remember this. They like to say that I'm friends with Russia. I'm not friends with anybody. I'm friends with you. I'm not friends with that. I want the right thing to happen for our country, for everybody, for humanity. But I'm the one that stopped the pipeline. It's called Nord Stream 2. Until I came along, nobody ever heard, not one person in this room ever heard of Nord Stream 2. You probably did, yes, because it went to Germany. He's the only one.
Knowing that this was a mistake.
But I stopped it. I stopped it. Yeah, and you've said that openly. Yeah. It was a mistake because, and I used to go with Angela. I say, well, wait a minute. We're spending all this money to defend you against Russia, and then you're giving Russia billions of dollars a month. What kind of a deal is that? You know, which was but you said it better than anybody else. I appreciate it. But I'm the one that stopped it. And that was the biggest economic development job, if you want to call it that, in the history, think of it, in the history of Russia. That was a massive, it's the biggest pipeline in the world. Going to go all over Europe, not only to Germany. You know, they were Germany, but then they were branching off all over to Europe. Nobody ever heard of, not one person of you heard of it. And I stopped it. It was dead. And then they say, I'm friends with Putin. I got along with him. He respected me, I respected him. It would have never happened. But I stopped Nord Stream 2. When Biden came in, almost the first week, he approved it. He let it be built. And then they say that I wasn't tough on Russia. Putin said to me, you know, you're not tough on Russia. You stopped the biggest, most important job we've ever done. You stopped it. And Biden came in and he let it be built. And I'll tell you what, I'll never forget the day I had it totally stopped. They weren't building. They gave up on it. They weren't able to. And then Biden came in and he let him build. I couldn't believe it. Okay, one or two questions more, please. Any questions? Any question for the Chancellor?
Yes.
Go ahead, for the Chancellor. I like his answers much better.
Will you continue to support Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm with Ukraine. We just signed a big deal on rare earth with Ukraine. And I want to, you know what, I'm for stopping killing, really. That's what I'm for. Again, a war that would have never started, should have never started. I want to see the killing stop. We spent $350 billion, much more than Europe, but Europe spent a lot also. And they spent way over $100 billion.
Yeah.
So you're talking about close to $500 billion went into that whole thing. And it's not even the money. And I know with you too, it's a lot of money, but it's the death that's being caused. We went to the Middle East. I went last week to the Middle East. We took in $5.1 trillion. That's many, many times. That's 30, 40 times, 50 times more than what we're talking about. It's think of that, $5.1 trillion of investment with one trip that lasted 4 days. So it's not the money. It's a little bit money, but not the money, the big thing. The big thing is the death. The death of, and really the decimation. You've lost a whole culture. You know, Ukraine had the most beautiful turrets. They call them turrets, little towers, beautiful towers, the most beautiful in the world. They're all now laying on their side, blown to smithereens. It'll never happen again. They've taken away the culture of a country.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This collagen is a powder. You take it every day. It's going to help with your skin, your hair, your nails, musculature, your joints, your cartilage, and your bones. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even milk. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, take the resveratrol. Resveratrol is very important. It's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals, help with the mitochondrial health, boost up those energy levels. It's going to help with youthful gene expression and help to get rid of cells that are in senescence. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. Stack it with C60, ubiquinol, and NAD+. And vitamin C and magnesium, really important. It's dual purpose. It's actually not dual, it's multi-purpose. It'll help with your skin. It'll help to boost up your immune system, and it'll help with your brain function, because the magnesium, taking magnesium, it has been found that brain function improves. Very important. So take the vitamin C and magnesium, drink it with filtered water. And having a good sleep continuously, consistently, is very important. Getting into 3 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep will help to detoxify your body. You'll be well rested in the morning, and you're going to help to consolidate memory. So take the Good Night formula every night. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. By doing that, you're going to improve your memory, detoxify your body, and you're going to be well rested. It has been found that chronic sleep deprivation, it can be immunosuppressive. It can cause problems with memory and potentially early onset of dementia. So it's very important to get a good night's sleep. All right. So let's go back to Bloomberg and the Oval Office.
I like to look at them, right?
It's terrible.
So
It's really
bodies, arms, heads, legs all over the place. You've never seen anything like it. It's so ridiculous.
And this is only by Russian weapons against Ukraine. This had never happened with Ukraine weapons against Russia. Never. Ukraine is only targeting military targets, not civilians, not private, not energy infrastructure. So this is the difference, and that's the reason why we are trying to do more on Russia, how to stop this war.
Well, in this case, I'm talking about the battlefield, you know, the soldiers on soldiers. But you could also say that too with the cities. You know, the cities are being hit also. So it's a terrible, terrible thing. Somebody said autopen. Did I hear the word autopen?
I'm just curious.
Because I think it's the biggest scandal maybe in the last 100 years in this country. So when I hear that word, I think it has to be discussed because the fake news will try and, hide it, and we can't do that.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Have you uncovered any evidence that anything specific was signed without President Biden's knowledge or by other people in the administration acting illegally?
Well, I don't think Biden would know whether or not he signed it.
I'm asking if you've uncovered any of that information.
No, but I've uncovered, the human mind. I was in a debate with the human mind, and I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing. So, it's just one of those things, one of those problems. We can't ever allow that to happen to our country. The danger our country was in, and I know some of the people that worked with him, radical left, horrible people. And I could give you the name of some of the people that use the autopen because I'm here. And I ask questions about people that were here also. There are a lot of people that were here when that happened, and they're here right now, and they'll answer your question very accurately. But I know some of the people that use that autopen, and those are not the people that had the same ideology as Joe Biden. These were radical left lunatics that used that, and they didn't get elected. He didn't get elected either, actually. Thank you very much, everybody.
Roughly 45 minutes in the.
I'll tell you, we will never see a president like that ever again. So just enjoy the ride.
You're always able to watch us on YouTube, live from Washington by searching Bloomberg Business News Live. Quite the romp there. We covered a lot of ground. To quickly, if you're just joining us, just stop down on some of what we heard. Big questions about whether the president would speak to the objections, passionate objections from Elon Musk when it comes to the reconciliation bill. One of the first things that came up, President Trump saying, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. I was surprised. He said that Elon was upset about the EV mandate, something that we've heard quite a bit about here. In fact, a story on the terminal that we've crunched numbers on this, as a matter of fact, with Tesla, according to JP Morgan, facing $1.2 billion of risk in this Trump tax bill. President Trump saying that Elon hasn't said a bad thing about me personally, but I'm sure that'll be next. I'm very disappointed in Elon. Only moments later, Elon Musk takes to Twitter writing, whatever. Keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. He goes on to say, either you get a big and ugly bill or a slim and beautiful bill. Slim and beautiful is the way. Ukraine, of course, looming large in this conversation with the Chancellor of Germany on Vladimir Putin. President Trump saying he got hit, referring to Ukraine's mission to go deep into Russia last weekend. He says he's been doing hitting, so I understand it, but he got hit hard. I don't think he's playing games, knowing that a retaliation is coming, as President Trump wrote on Truth Social yesterday. He likened them to kids in a schoolyard, Ukraine and Russia, knowing, of course, that Ukraine was invaded by Russia, saying sometimes you see the two kids fighting like crazy. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while. He got into the CBO, Congressional Budget Office scoring of the reconciliation bill, saying everyone says scoring. No one knows what scoring means. When it came to gas prices, he said we have states where gas is $1.98 a gallon. We have no evidence that that is the case in any of the 50 states. And then, of course, a deep dive on the auto pen, saying it's the big scandal of the last many years, remembering that Donald Trump last evening announced an investigation from the office into what happened in the prior administration, the use of the auto pen, and what he describes as a cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. That's what we have for you today at the White House. That meeting in the Oval will now move into a lunch with the Chancellor of Germany, and we'll keep tabs on any other headlines that we get from the White House. We want to bring you into an important conversation right now on Bloomberg with the mayor of San Francisco, Daniel Lurie, sitting down with Bloomberg Business Week editor Brad Stone. Let's put an ear on this conversation live on Bloomberg.
Yeah, so those are two good examples. Private-public partnership is always needed. Every city does this. This is not something new. It's just.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gel that I have. I have it in the tube form and in the quick dispenser. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. It's dual purpose. You can use it as a skincare every day. You can put it on a cut and help to heal it. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears. Lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. You can use it as an aftershave. Please go to my store and get the gels. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Clarity Factor helps to get rid of that brain fog, and it also helps to support your memory. If you need to concentrate at work or at home, or even if you're retired, just concentrating on tasks, taking Clarity Factor is going to help you. And getting those neurons firing on a continuous basis and you're being able to think clearly, you're going to be able to build neuroplasticity, positive neuroplasticity. That's really important for memory, and that's important just for overall neural function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the Clarity Factor. Extremely important. It stacks really well with NAD+, ubiquinol, C60, resveratrol. Make sure you drink filtered water. And Myotrol. If you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking Myotrol. Myotrol helps with gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. When you get older, you start to atrophy. And when you atrophy, you're losing muscle, you're losing bone density, and you need to reverse that course, or you're going to have problems in your geriatric years. So do resistance training, take Myotrol, do that every day, and you're going to be able to build muscle and reduce the effects of just overall aging and the atrophy of your musculature. In addition, taking Myotrol with Gladiator Barley, you'll get an additional strength benefit in building muscle. So it's very important. Take it every day. Very, 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 very important. Okay. Now, we were talking about Gladiator Barley. Now, Gladiator Barley is a powder. It's a high-density protein. You get a big scooper. This is a month's supply. Take it every day. Mix it with soft foods like how I do it. Or you can mix it with milk or just with filtered water or even in a smoothie, but take it every day. But what this will do is help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase, and it will help you to build muscle. It stacks really well with Myotrol. Do resistance training, you'll gain muscle, you'll recover quicker because it's going to reduce inflammation, and it's going to soak up those free radicals. And you're detoxifying your body too. It's a huge benefit by taking Gladiator Barley and building up muscle. But not just that. It stacks well with Myotrol and Boomer Boost. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So let's go to another video here. I want to cover some of the other stuff like Times Radio here. Wait. Let's play MSNBC here.
With the help of zero accounting software, I've got the right information at my fingertips.
So business is a breeze. And I've got bigger plans. Search zero with an X.
Welcome back. A stark new warning from Russia's Vladimir Putin issued via President Trump. In a social media post, President Trump says he spoke with Putin for more than an hour yesterday, and that Putin vowed strong retaliation for the stunning Ukrainian drone assault across multiple locations deep inside Russia this week. New footage released by the Ukrainian Security Service shows more of that attack that devastated some aircraft of Russia's bomber fleet, a surprise assault a whole year and a half in the making. Let's go to NBC's chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, for the very latest. Keir, where does Putin's retaliation threats leave potential peace negotiations?
Well, that's a great question, and much of it depends on what's in the mind of not President Putin, but President Trump. The political site, Axios, citing sources who discussed it with him, say President Trump called those Ukrainian drone strikes badass and strong, but is concerned that those strikes will make a ceasefire harder. So the war continues. And so does a propaganda battle, with Ukraine releasing more details of that attack on Russian bombers, while Russia claiming, clearly falsely from the images, that all the planes can be repaired.
President Trump and President Putin offering their first public reaction as new video emerges of Ukraine's drone attack that devastated some of Russia's deadly long-range bomber fleet. The more than 4 minutes of footage released by the Ukrainian Security Service shows additional Russian aircraft targeted, including what appears to be an A-50 spy plane. After an hour and 15-minute phone call between the two men, Trump saying Putin told him, quote, very strongly, Russia will have to respond. Moscow has launched an onslaught of air attacks in recent weeks. This latest video, the aftermath of a Russian drone and missile attack on Kharkiv in just the last 24 hours. Trump did not say whether he tried to persuade Putin against another deadly offensive. Despite close to 1 million Russian military casualties, 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers, according to a new report, and President Trump's long-standing conviction that Putin was ready to end the war.
I believe Putin wants to do it. And if I thought that President Putin did not want to get this over with, I wouldn't even be talking about it.
Trump said his call with the Russian leader was not a conversation that will immediately lead to peace. That impasse did not prevent them from discussing cooperation on other issues, like Iran nuclear negotiations. Iran's close relations with Russia, along with China and North Korea, has been dubbed an axis of resistance. President Zelensky warning Putin feels impunity and that Russia is, quote, giving the finger to the entire world.
We just have to pressure on him, and maybe we will get peace.
President Zelensky handing out medals. His message, Ukraine can keep fighting.
And now back to that drone strike, top Ukrainian officials insisting that 41 Russian aircraft were destroyed or damaged. So far, visual evidence is not available to confirm that number. The Russian spy plane that you saw there, for example, in the footage, you don't actually see it on fire, but there is other footage which shows Ukraine targeting Russian planes that at that moment are loaded with bombs. Anna.
Right, Keir Simmons, thank you. Joining us now is Igor Novikov. He's in Kyiv. He's former advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Igor, it's good to have you with us. Ceasefire negotiations seem to be at a standstill right now. Russia's already stepped up its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, vowing further retaliation after that massive attack. What are the Ukrainian people bracing for to happen next?
Well, I'm pretty sure nothing we haven't seen before, on one hand. On the other hand, obviously, Putin is a bit angry about what happened in the Operation Spiderweb. But unfortunately, that's the only thing we can do. We need to make sure that the cost of this war for Putin is unbearable. And since we don't have as much support as we had from the West, we have to basically use the asymmetrical war tactic.
I mean, it was like something out of a spy thriller, that Operation Spiderweb. How big of a morale boost was that for Ukraine? And I guess conversely, are you worried about setbacks when it comes to reaching a ceasefire?
Well, I don't believe in ceasefire until autumn, to be honest, because Putin is not interested in that. In the conventional warfare, he does have advantage at the moment, hence our asymmetrical attacks. Plus, I don't think President Trump is really helping, because if you analyze what he said, he basically said the operation was badass, so continue doing that. Putin's going to strike in retaliation. Well, nothing I can do about it, but guys, I want peace. I mean, that doesn't work like that.
So we know President Trump and Putin spoke for more than an hour, but President Trump didn't say whether he tried to persuade Putin from retaliating. What do you make of the U.S. involvement at this point?
Well, it's absolutely horrific. I mean, that statement I saw from him on Truth Social, because basically what he's saying is, you know, a dictator just said, I'm going to murder a bunch of civilians, because if anyone's got any doubts, he's going to attack civilians rather than the military targets. You just wait and see. And the president of the United States, you know, the leader of the free world, just said, well, you know, he just told me that. I didn't say anything in return.
Igor Novikov, thanks so much.
Or you will. Yeah.
Thank you for giving us this pulse check from Ukraine and for continuing to provide that insight. We appreciate you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. You take this the exact same way that you would take the gladiator barley, but the heirloom barley focuses on detoxification of your body, bringing down inflammation, and soaking up free radicals with superoxide dismutase. It's a high-density protein. You take a scooper a day or a half a scooper. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even milk, but take it every day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And let's talk about the first pillar of my protocol here. So I call it the core, all right? And with the core protocol, the first pillar is to help boost up your immune system by taking the max 14, max 35, and the cleanse. Second pillar is C60 to soak up free radicals. The third pillar is the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the lignans to boost up the immune system. And the fourth pillar is the boomer boost to boost up your energy levels and your metabolism. You can stack on top of that or customize whatever you're looking for in terms of your supplement stack. But with max 14, max 35, or a cleanse, take a teaspoon a day. So you take, you can take the max 14 or the 35 in the cleanse. All right. Right. You can just take one of them, take a teaspoon a day, and it will help to improve your oral cavity, your oral pharynx, the mucosal barrier, your epithelial lining, and help to boost up that immune system. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. And it's really simple. Just swish it in your mouth, gargle 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then swallow it. It's very simple, all right? If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two, and then go back to your maintenance dose. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the max 14 or the max 35 or the cleanse. Cleanse is 30 parts per million, 30 ppms. 14, max 14 is 14 parts per million, and the max 35 is 35 parts per million. They're at different price points, based on your affordability. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. All right. Let's listen to Times Radio, because I'm not sure, my understanding was the drone attack really decimated his air capability.
The Ukrainian agents were able to assemble their drones there, put them into the false roofs of these log cabins and deploy them across the country using unsuspecting truck drivers. The audacity to do this right under the noses of Putin's FSB is really quite incredible.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And this time we're joined by Maxim Tucker. Maxim is the Times' Ukraine correspondent. He's been reporting from the front lines in Ukraine since 2022. Maxim, you're just back. I'll ask you about that trip in a moment. But I want to start off by this President Putin taking a couple of days to break his silence over this daring mass Ukrainian drone attacks on multiple airfields in Russia. Donald Trump's account was he had a phone call with Putin, and that was the first we heard of any kind of response where he's threatening retaliation. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's astonishing. It's almost a week now since these attacks. A huge blow struck to Russia's nuclear-capable long-range missile carriers, and no response from Putin himself to this, apart from what we hear from Donald Trump. I mean, this is, I think, classic Putin when he is confronted with a difficult situation, a difficult decision, he doesn't know what to do. He stumbles a little bit and he doesn't respond. So we haven't heard from him. He's pledged apparently to Trump retaliation, but clearly he doesn't still know what kind of retaliation he can bring. I mean, Russia is already attacking Ukraine pretty much the maximum of its capabilities. It's sending hundreds of drones now. It's been sending a lot of cruise missiles into Ukraine. This obviously limits the amount of missile carriers that Russia has, that Russia can send against Ukraine. Russia is already using chemical weapons in many areas of the front to try and dislodge Ukrainian troops. So what's he got left? I mean, a nuclear response, but obviously that's going to be intolerable even by Donald Trump, I would have thought.
On those attacks, those daring drone attacks that hit all the news since the weekend, you've been looking into the planning of it, which was 18 months, we understand, and you've been in contact with the SBU, Ukraine's SBU, since finding out more about it. What more have you learned about that operation?
I think one of the astonishing things about this operation is carried out right under the noses of President Putin's FSB security services, from a warehouse in Chelyabinsk, maybe 2 miles away from the FSB office, and that's one of Russia's largest cities near the border with Kazakhstan. The Ukrainian agents were able to assemble their drones there, put them into the false roofs of these log cabins and deploy them across the country using unsuspecting truck drivers. The audacity to do this right under the noses of Putin's FSB is really quite incredible.
And what are the SBUs saying to you about it? They're clearly wanting to push this and keep it in the media attention.
It's a huge success for them at a time when morale has been very difficult in Ukraine. There have been concerted Russian attacks, the largest 3 in a row Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities over a couple of weekends ago. And people are starting to wonder when this war will end. They're not getting additional support from the US. And how will this war end without the support from Western partners it had been relying on? So a commission like this, which shows that Ukraine can rely on its own ingenuity and its own technology to deal a kind of asymmetric blow to Russia's incredibly powerful nuclear-capable bombers, has really lifted the mood around Kiev. And it was astonishing, how many people were talking about this when I was still there. Ordinary people were getting this news in their channel, in their feeds. And celebrating it, actually, because these are the bombers that are night after night delivering cruise missiles that keep them awake, that keep them in the basements, keep them worried for their lives, and they're worried for the lives of their children. So people are very happy to see Russia attacked in this way, and also very happy that it didn't have to rely necessarily on any Western equipment to do it. And it shows that Ukraine has opportunities and abilities to strike Russia where it hurts, even if it's not getting Western support.
You say you were there when this news came through. Were you there long enough to get any sense of what difference it has made to those aerial bombardments that have been so incessant?
Well, I think, it's been quite cloudy and rainy in Kiev, so it's always difficult to interpret what's causing delays in attacks. I mean, most recently, there have been a lot more drone attacks than missile attacks, the hundreds and hundreds of these Shahed drones launched against Ukrainian cities. And that's because the Russians are able to mass produce these and relatively cheap, whereas the missiles are obviously more expensive, more complicated, and they rely on components which are subject to sanctions and are more difficult to bring into the country as a result of that. I think, the number of cruise missile strikes will kind of remain. It's only been a week, and Russia kind of tends to launch these big cruise missile strikes every week or so. So we don't know exactly how it's impacted them. But certainly they're not going to be able to put as many aircraft into the air as before. That, they're going to have to rotate the same aircraft more frequently. There's wear and tear on these aircraft. Some of these aircraft are probably going to have to be cannibalized to replace damaged parts on other aircraft. It will have an impact, but it remains to be seen exactly how much it will affect the amount of missiles that Russia can now launch into Ukraine.
And on your latest trip, Maxim, you found out about the way that radio electronic warfare is being developed and adapted to deal with the unmanned aerial vehicle systems. Can you tell me about the work and what you learned about the work of the specialized school you went to and what it does exactly?
So 6 years ago, these were farmers and truck drivers, and now they're having to learn how to save their lives and save the lives of their comrades by mastering radio electronic warfare. This is something that the captain had learned, spent 6 years learning himself and had to try and impart this in 24 days. And he said it was particularly difficult because people were selected for these courses almost at random. He told me a story about how one soldier had been selected to attend the class based on the fact that he had knocked a Russian drone after a tree with a long stick and presented it to his commander after it didn't explode. And the commander said, "Oh, right, you're going to be our drone expert," and off you go to learn about radio-electronic warfare. So warfare and the technology involved in it has so rapidly advanced, it's way ahead of what people can now learn in the classroom. And that's one of the reasons why AI, I think, is increasingly becoming important on the battlefield.
I found it really interesting in your dispatch, though, to find the kind of ways that these people who are using electronic warfare are trying to deceive the drone operators, the Russian drone operators, into missing their targets or thinking that their drone is still up in the air. How are they doing that exactly?
So there were some fascinating methods that they have. They've got these devices now which can intercept the data being transmitted back to Russian drone operators. And they would use that. Initially, they said that they used these the interceptions to transmit porn back to the operators so that they would be distracted. And then they realized they could actually record these flights and send the drone operators previous versions of their flight routes so that the drone operators would think that they're still flying one of their routes to attack a target. And meanwhile, they would be triangulating the position of the drone operator and attacking them. So using the broadcast of a previous flight so that the Russian drone operator would not know that he'd already been intercepted and targeted by the Ukrainians. And it's fascinating, the kind of things that these technology enables them to do and how rapidly it's advancing.
And this specialized school is the last testing ground before the front line. Did you get a sense of what works and what doesn't and why?
So they've got like a good set of equipment. They had a plan to use what they call a Mirage system to build a radio electronic wall across the front line, which would detect these drones based on their radio signals. It can detect them because they're too small to be detected by radar usually. And it can use either a kind of conventional jammer to block the signal, the radio signal, or it could guide a kind of automated turret to shoot them down. Now, the problem with this is that almost as quickly as this technology is developed, more technology is developed, and Russia's obviously now got these fiber optic drones, and fiber optic drones are not emitting a radio signal and cannot be jammed in the same way, so they have to have some kind of physical means of destruction. Now, they're still the minority. There are not so many fiber optic drones on the battlefield as there are radio drones. But, as the war goes on, as these devices that intercept and jam signals are going to become more successful, we can expect to see more fiber optics and then a countermeasure to the fiber optics, presumably.
Is this school then already working on the next line of defense?
So the school is really working what it's have, and it's trying to take lessons back to the manufacturers and the developers to see what are the things that work and what are the things that don't work. It's a testing ground for pilots as well. There are drone pilots learning their craft there. So it's vital for feeding back information to the manufacturers. But the driving force of this is actually, it's not being done necessarily on the front line, but it's really being done in the tech hubs of Ukraine, where there are software engineers coming together from across the country and often in rival companies, but working together to try and formulate solutions to the latest battlefield problems. And they are a huge advantage to Western military tech companies now, because they are able to go to the battlefield, learn from the soldiers, take those lessons back, test their products, and then bring them back and also produce them at scale for relatively a cheap amount, because the Ukrainians are needing to use so many of them in the battle against Russia.
And what is absolutely extraordinary is amidst these kind of gargantuan efforts that you describe for Ukraine to defend its scale in a struggle for its own survival, you've got these kind of domestic political fights going on. And one of your articles was about the intense rivalry between President Zelensky and the former world champion heavyweight boxer, now mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko. How did that rivalry start exactly?
So I think this rivalry stems back. It was a small scale then, but in 2019, Zelensky had hoped to ally with Klitschko in Kiev to win local elections and have a coalition in Kiev. And Klitschko then chose to instead align with Poroshenko, who was Zelensky's arch rival. And I think Zelensky never really forgiven him for that. Now, Klitschko, obviously, he has his own presidential ambitions. He tried to run in 2014 and probably sees himself as a potential successor to Zelensky. And I think that kind of political feud has been bubbling away at the surface. What Zelensky's done since the war started is to appoint military administrations in many of the major cities across the country. And those powers mirror some of the powers that local mayors have. And Zelensky has been accused of consolidating his power at the expense of elected mayors and elected councils in different countries. Now, here's an argument to say you need to do that because it's wartime and you need to make sure there are enough shelters and there are enough defenses and fortifications in these cities. And Klitschko has been accused of corruption. There have been arrests of close members of his team who seem to have been actually caught red-handed. And we spoke to several independent experts who said that these are legitimate corruption arrests. And none of it directly ties to Klitschko, but when you have 10 arrests of your subordinates, it does point to being very laissez-faire at the very least about corruption under your watch. Now, Klitschko has responded to that quite angrily, saying, he told me that this the Ukraine now reeks of authoritarianism, and he thought that Zelensky had been
behind this whole story. The Ukraine now reeks of authoritarianism, and he thought that Zelensky had been going too far in taking up powers from locally elected mayors. Ironically, that no matter what the truth is behind this whole story, those kind of pronouncements about Zelensky would be welcomed by someone like President Putin. He's only looking for excuses to knock the leadership of Ukraine at the moment and sow division.
Yes, that's exactly the kind of narrative that Putin will be happy to see, and that Putin has been trying to spread across Ukraine's allies. So that kind of division is something that will be welcomed in Russia. You can see why Klitschko is doing it, because there is this huge battle playing out for control of Kiev's resources and funding at the moment. And there are big questions about the priorities in the country, because there's a lot of construction work still going up at the same time as fortifications and trench lines need to be built in the east of the country.
So what kind of things are we talking about? What kind of examples have you got of the kind of disparity between where the money is being spent and where people feel it should be being spent?
So one thing that Ukrainians in Kiev have told me repeatedly is how frustrated they are at the traffic jams across the country, and that a metro line that Klitschko promised in 2017 has failed to materialize, that the metro, even though it's underground, shuts down during air raids, and you only have these really awful little yellow buses which run across the city, belching diesel fumes everywhere, and they run in exchange for cash. It's a cash-only business. And city councillors accuse Klitschko of being linked to this, what they're called the Marshutka mafia, and taking cash payments that don't pay taxes, don't contribute to the economy in any way, and benefiting from that.
He clearly denies that.
He denies that, of course. He said that those are lies and manipulations spread by the office of the president in order to smear his reputation. He was very strong on his rebuttal to that. But it demonstrates this struggle for power that's going on. Zelensky's appointed kind of rival mayor, Timur Tkachenko, is now appointing different heads of different districts in Kiev, and that's very much taking away some of Klitschko's powers, and he'd be very cross about that.
How much did you get a sense that the longer the war actually goes on, the more difficult it is to keep these kind of rivalries and these political feuds at bay in the interests of pulling together in a war effort?
It's very difficult. I mean, obviously, during the kind of Russian airstrikes that you have at the moment, there is just no feasible way of holding elections, at least in the manner that they used to hold elections in Ukraine. So there is no way that dissenting voices can be represented at the ballot box. And now obviously we had 3 years of war, so people might be dissatisfied with Zelensky, they might be dissatisfied with Klitschko, but nobody can have even local elections to express that dissatisfaction. And so you're going to see this kind of frustrations bubbling to the fore more and more often, I think. And it shows how important it is for Ukraine to think about a way to allow these voices to express themselves without creating huge disunity in the country and without causing and ending up in large-scale protests, which is the real big risk here, is that if people aren't able to hold elections and express their dissent, then they will take it to the streets as they have previously done in Ukraine, and that could have disastrous consequences.
You are a regular visitor to Ukraine for your reporting trips. Can you tell me what your impressions were on this particular visit? How have you seen the country change?
So I think it's always remarkable how resilient Ukraine is and how people manage to go about their business even if no one slept all night because they've been under air raids and you can hear explosions in the streets outside when you're trying to sleep from midnight till 6 in the morning. People don't rest, but they carry on and they get up as if nothing's happened. And it is astonishing how people do that. I think the mood has soured in recent weeks, with the election of Trump and the kind of expectation that at some point surely Trump is going to see that Putin is playing him, and still he says 2 weeks, I'm giving Putin another 2 weeks to show he's serious about peace. There is frustration and there's worry that without these Western weapons that Ukraine will not be able to hold the line and that there is a greater threat. There's obviously the problems with mobilizations where men are scared to go outside because they're worried that they might be conscripted if they go to a restaurant or if they go to the gym or something, they'll be picked up by recruitment officers. These are real fears, but I think that's why it was so important that we had at the end of last week this Operation Spiderweb, because it suddenly gave people a feeling of hope and possibility and a feeling that some kind of victories can be scored against the Russians. And I think that's really, really important for morale in Ukraine, particularly at this point in the war when you see so many hundreds of drones being sent against Ukrainian cities every night. And that has a huge impact on the morale of the civilian population.
We started at the beginning talking about these very dramatic air drone attacks on multiple airfields in Russia. I'm just wondering whether you think, in the context of things, this is a one-off because it was so long in the planning and so spectacular in its results, or do you think there is going to be a follow-up and this is part of a concerted campaign?
I think there definitely will be follow-ups. I think the technology is changing and Ukraine will be able to do this in different ways. So maybe 18 months ago, when you were planning this operation, you thought we need to drive trucks into Ukraine and they will deliver these short-range drones a few kilometers into Russian air bases. Now you have completely autonomous drones. I was talking to a developer today that was talking about drones that they train it on a target. So you can give it an aeroplane, a video of an aeroplane, train their AI targeting software on that, and then just send it 130 kilometers to try and find this target. You probably have some intelligence giving you coordinates where you think it's located. It will recognize by itself the route that it's taking through landmarks. You can teach it to dodge different countermeasures. So the way that the war will be fought is not necessarily drones delivered by trucks, but drones delivered over increasingly long distances, which aren't limited by the radio horizon or jamming or anything that is currently affecting drone warfare. But they will just be programmed and sent to do a job, and they will carry that out. It'll be very difficult. The only way that you'll be able to stop them is to shoot them down. And these are very small devices with only a few kilograms of explosive. But obviously, when they hit the right spot, precision spot on a major target, that we've seen the damage that can have. So I think that both sides will be doing this. There are the long-range drones that already go thousands of kilometers. They can also be programmed differently in future. These kind of operations will continue, but they might look a little bit different, but they'll still be as devastating a consequence, I think.
Maxim Tucker, great to speak to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60, the extra virgin olive oil version, or the MCT coconut oil C60, or the avocado C60. By taking a teaspoon a day, you're going to soak up free radicals, you're going to help the mitochondrial health, you're going to increase your ATP, you're going to have less stress in the cell. And when the cell is performing properly and your tissues are performing properly, your organ systems and your glands and your endocrine system and your immune system and your neurons will perform properly. See, the key here is to soak up free radicals and reduce the stress on the cell and on the mitochondria. And that way you're increasing energy levels and you're increasing the efficiency of the cellular processes. Now, C60 is very potent. It's going to soak up hundreds, if not 1,000 times more free radicals than 1 molecule of vitamin C. In C60, what you'll notice is that over time, you're actually visibly seeing your body age slower. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach for best absorption. If you work out, take it before your workout. It'll soak up the free radicals while you're working out, and you'll recover quicker. But take it every day. Take a teaspoon a day. I've been taking this since 2016. All right. And it's a major part of my core protocol. It's the second pillar to soak up free radicals. The first pillar is to take the max 14 or max 35 or cleanse and boost up that immune system. C60 is going to help with soaking up free radicals. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, boosts up that immune system. And the fourth pillar is the boomer boost. It's going to boost up those energy levels and rev up your metabolism. But C60 taking regularly is going to reduce stress in your cells, soak up those free radicals, and it'll also soak up free radicals in your bloodstream. And by soaking up free radicals in your bloodstream, you're reducing oxidized LDL. When you reduce the amount of oxidized LDL, you're reducing plaque formation. That's why it helps with the cardiovascular system. And for your neurons, it helps by reducing stress in the neuron and also soaking up the free radicals in the neuron. And by doing that, you're going to have healthy mitochondria. You need lots of mitochondria producing ATP so you can produce neurotransmitters so your neurons function properly. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the C60. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And lastly, get the drops and the lozenges. Very important. Whenever you have that irritation in your throat, take it right away, either at home or at work. Just be prepared. I have 3 flavors for the drops. You get 100 in each bag. The blueberry, the drops are smaller than the lozenges. You can also get it in cherry and in honey and lemon. By being prepared, you mitigate any issue that you may have. I also have lozenges in stock. It's elderberry zinc. You get 21 in each bag. Get a few bags for your household. Be prepared. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. That's my broadcast for today. The S&P 500 is trading at 5,964. VIX is trading at 1757. Tomorrow is going to be a big data day. So be prepared. There's going to be a lot of movement, I think, in the market tomorrow. So see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.